Hello, True Health Seekers, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Learn True Health podcast. I have a fantastic interview for you today. If you're listening to this when it just came out, happy Labor Day weekend for those in Canada and the United States, and happy end of August, beginning of school year, and September for everyone else in the world. I'm very excited for what's to come in the following months. Learn True Health we've got some amazing plans coming up, including what I'm not going to tell you right now, but I'm very excited to tell you shortly. And phase one of my diabolical plan was just complete yesterday. I had with me a sound engineer. He spent almost the whole day with me. His name's Joe. He was awesome. And he helped me set up my new studio system for recording, which is going to take place starting next week with all of the interviews that I've got lined up. We will be using a soundboard and a different mic. And so hopefully the plan is to bring you even better quality audio when it comes to interviewing these amazing guests. So look forward to that. He gave me some great lessons, so I'm a little bit nervous using this new soundboard, but we've got it all dialed in. So just look forward to even better quality audio. And I have to thank all the Learn True Health listeners that are Patreon supporters for helping. It's because of you that we were able to fund our audio engineer, who's willing to come back and keep helping me dial in and getting even better quality audio for the podcast recording when we record interviews. And because of you guys, we were able to buy the new equipment. We were able to buy this new soundboard and new mic. So my new headphones. So big shout out to you guys. Thank you. And if you're a listener and you're not a Patreon supporter, please consider joining just $1 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month, whatever you'd like to help to support us in producing this podcast. The cost of producing this show is about $280 something every episode. We have between all of the hosting and the equipment and the staff that takes to put on this show. So I really appreciate your help, because I've taken all the Patreon support money and put it back towards making this podcast even better. And I've got some great plans coming up in the following months to bring you even better and even more information, holistic health information, including branching out into making more videos with doctors. So that's in the works. Really excited to bring that to you. I have to also let you know that two of my favorite companies, Institute for Integrative Nutrition and Sunlight and Saunas, both of them are throwing some really big Labor Day sales. So if you've listened to me talk about Sunlight and Saunas in the past and you're interested in either getting a solo system, that's an affordable system that you can lay in. It's just a single person system. It helps you to detoxify heavy metals, lose weight, really good for anti-aging, for pain and inflammation. People have amazing results with pain and inflammation and weight loss. I've had some great results, and I've been doing it specifically for detoxing heavy metals and for weight loss. And so if you are interested, contact Sunlighten now. Give them a call and just talk to them about their different systems, which one's right for you, because the best price you will ever pay for a Sunlighten is happening during their Labor Day sale. And I've talked to the manager there, and she let me in on the inside scoop that this pricing, it will never be this good. This is the lowest it'll ever be. And they're releasing some new models that have new features in the future. They'll be a bit pricier. So right now is the best time to buy your Sunlight and Sauna. I bought mine with their really easy financing. So if you're thinking, I'd love to get that solo system that you can actually put away into your closet when you're not using it. Or you can get the one I got, which is the 3-in-1. It's about the size of a closet, but two people can fit in there. And either one, if you're interested in a sauna, but you're thinking, man, I just couldn't afford, because saunas are a few $1,000s. It's a health investment. You can get really affordable really easy financing, and I was very happy that that I qualified. So likely, if I qualified, you can qualify for their great financing. Now, the Institute for Integrative Nutrition is hosting a wonderful Labor Day sale. They're giving $1,000 off plus a bunch of bonuses. They almost never do this. They threw in a ton of bonuses. So give them a call. And they usually have, if there's maybe 3 times a year, they have some really good sale. But this Labor Day sale is quite impressive. So you save $1,000 plus they give you a bunch of other stuff. Just Google Institute for Integrative Nutrition or Google IIN. Just talk to them, get some information, collect some information, and see if it's right for you to join them now, because it's a really good price. If you're interested in becoming a holistic health coach, I went through their program. I absolutely loved it. I found it life-changing. I would have done it just for my own personal growth. That's how much I got out of it. So I definitely recommend it. And they also have a payment plan. And usually you can get a interest-free payment plan that's affordable. So again, those 2 companies I love, and I'm excited that they're offering Labor Day sales. So I want to let you guys know about it. If you're listening to a show and it's not Labor Day anymore, still give them a call and see what kind of deal they honor for mentioning the Learn to Health podcast and mention my name, Ashley James, because I've talked to both companies and I've negotiated with them that they give the best deal to my listeners. Like many of my guests on the show will give our listeners great discounts. Excellent. Thank you so much for being a listener. Thank you so much for sharing the Learn to Health podcast with your friends, and enjoy today's interview. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 287. I am so excited for today's guest. We're in for such a treat. We have with us Dr. Marlene Merritt, who has a wealth of information. We were just chatting about, weight loss, for example, and polycystic ovarian syndrome and all these other issues that I've been through, right? And she goes, oh yeah, I've got an 8-hour lecture on that, and I've got a whole video series on this. And I'm like, yes, my listeners are gonna love this. So I'm very excited to have you here today, Marlene.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here as well.
Absolutely. Now, your website is merrittwellness.com. And of course, the link to everything that you do is going to be in the show notes of today's podcast at learntruehealth.com. I'd love to start by having you share your story because, when we think about doctors, I think everyone who hasn't been around holistic medicine thinks about MDs, right? And all of a sudden, this whole world opens up when people realize that MDs are just one small piece of the pie of medicine, and then there's this huge holistic chunk that makes up most of the pie of medicine in terms of healing professions and all these different ways that we could become a healer, not going through the allopathic drug-based system, but going through the system that supports the body's ability to heal itself. And I know that you're one of these holistic doctors that looks to help the body heal itself. So I'd love for you to share your story and what led you, what sparked in you this desire to become a healer.
Well, I came about it by very kind of understandable means. Like my mother is German, and she was always a bit suspicious about going to doctors too often. Like she was always against us getting lots of X-rays for dentists, things like that. She was always like, "Call me before they do anything." Okay. Anyway, but like when I was, I don't know, 9 and stressed out in school, I would have stomach aches, and she would have me drink chamomile tea, which, fast forward, 30 something years, I'm in graduate school for nutrition, and apparently chamomile is used in and has been studied quite a bit for gastritis. But I'm 9, and I was all surprised, but it worked. Or I got an infection on my arm once, and she said, no, you soak it in as hot as water as you can possibly stand, and it pulls the infection out. And like, holy cow, it totally did. So, I just learned things over time about like, oh, if you have like a lung, like I had asthma a lot as a kid and got bronchitis because my lungs were a little bit weak. And then she would always have me steam over a pot of, just been boiled water with some eucalyptus oil in it. And that always helped. So I didn't end up taking a lot of antibiotics as a kid, here and there maybe, but not really that much. And then I went to college, and I was racing bikes in college because I really enjoyed riding. This was up in New York, and And I did the thing that one shouldn't do, and I got sick and took somebody else, like another friend in the dorm. I was like, "Oh, I've got this infection." They're like, "Oh, here, I've got this extra antibiotic."
Ah,
So I didn't take the full series because I didn't know at the time, right? And the infection lodged in my heart, and I damaged one of my heart valves.
oh my
And
gosh.
so, yeah, and then I had chest pain and shortness of breath. I actually had to stop bike racing because of that. And so I just my whole life changed really. I ended up my practice now here is in Austin, Texas, but I was up in New York, and I ended up moving down here, and I really had to change my whole description of kind of what I was doing. I'd finished my bachelor's degree, which I'll tell you was not in science; it was in German. Because my mom is German, and I had lived in Europe for a bit, so I learned how to speak it, and so I got my degree in that. But I moved down to Austin, and I kind of had to really kind of reinvent myself in my early 20s like that, because I wasn't a bike racer anymore, and I didn't quite know what to do with a German degree, and so I got interested in. First, I was doing some massage therapy for a while, and that had always been interesting to me because bike racers are always have massage therapists on their teams. So I'd kind of seen it from both sides like that. And then I became really interested in Chinese medicine, and I ultimately went to grad to go. I went to graduate school for Chinese medicine, which is a 4-year degree, and an accredited school, like it's an actual Master of Science degree. And in Texas, especially, it's not just acupuncture, but it's also Chinese herbs, which is actually the hardest part of that training. And so, I go to Chinese medicine school, and they're like, "Oh, sure, we can," and in Chinese terms, and you could totally diagnose my heart condition. It was super clear. But then when they gave me all the herbs, and then I got all the teachers to give me acupuncture for quite a period of time, like it never got any better. And it was just like, I finished school and I realized that, like, okay, I guess I just have this thing that doesn't get better, right? Just like our patients do. And I just gave up kind of on that. And then 3 years later, I went to go see somebody who knew something about nutrition. And I was actually going for a different reason. And he looked at my form, like, all of your people fill out these forms with lots of questions on it. And he said, "Oh, you have chest pain?" I'm like, yeah, but I'm not here for that. And he said, "Oh, you probably have chest pain because you're vitamin E deficient." And I said, "Oh, no, I'm taking those pearls from Whole Foods." And he explained to me that what I was taking was alpha tocopherol, which is one in a plant. Vitamin E actually has 8 parts to it.
Mm.
But in the 1920s, when they were first studying the vitamins, alpha tocopherol, which is one of the 8 parts, was the most dominant part, and the part that they saw was the most kind of active in humans at the time. So now, when you buy a vitamin E supplement, it's typically listed as alpha tocopherol. If you get a really good one, it might say mixed tocopherols. But yeah, I just had the standard thing from Whole Foods, and so he's explaining this thing to me, and he gives me a little jar of a supplement that was made out of, like, it had all sorts of weird stuff in it, like dried pea vine juice and stuff like that. Like, kind of like it's some, like, I make jokes about, like, kind of meaty things. Like, I think there was liver in it. But anyway, two things like that, and I'd had this problem at that point for 15 years, and in a week I started getting better. And
Wow.
it was mind-boggling to me because nothing else had worked. And so I got all really well. Two things happened. One is I started riding my bike again, and the following year, I rode across the United States in 26 days, which is averaging 135 miles a day.
One supplement that was like a Whole Foods concoction,
Well,
basically.
so I got better with that. Like, it showed me what was possible, and then I started. This is before I did that ride. I started studying this because my husband, we met in graduate school for Chinese medicine, so he's sort of in the same journey with me, and he's like, "What was that?" And I'm like, "I don't know, what was that?" So we started kind of delving into, why is this supplement different than what I'd been taking, right? So fast forward then a year and a half, and at that point I'd been taking, in that same thinking of Whole Foods, taking a lot of other supplements, so I just gotten healthier and healthier, and then I rode across the United States. So,
Wow.
yeah, it was a crazy thing. So that was one thing, and then the other thing was, we changed our whole practice, and we began to see that, as and I love Chinese medicine for its ability to look at the body as a whole and really, like, put all the pieces together, and that's trained me super well for functional medicine. But at the time, it hadn't been able to help me, right? So now we're looking at nutrition and realizing, like, oh, maybe this is why Chinese medicine doesn't always work so well for American patients, is because we did not grow up eating the same thing as the traditional Chinese. They ate like, chicken hearts on skewers and, organ meats and vegetables, way more vegetables and, way less sugar and things like that. So we changed the focus of our practice to include nutrition. And so then we spent a lot of time, years, then studying nutrition and what was different between, like, what was the thing with food and why was food different. So that when we finally went and got another master's degree in nutrition at the University of Bridgeport, which is one of the best human nutrition master's programs, if you're interested also in functional medicine, is a fantastic program. And it's like a 3-year deal. So we go there, and it was amazing to us to see that everything we'd learned about food really translated into nutrition. And what we were studying in nutrition had been the thing I'd always been a little worried about in the past, which is it's being boiled down to pieces. That vitamin E as described as alpha tocopherol, for example, or vitamin C as described as ascorbic acid, which is not actually how it works in nature.
Right, or folic acid.
Well, yeah, well, but folic acid actually is found in nature. You have
Is
a
it?
receptor. Yes, you have a receptor site for folic acid. This is a big this is a big fallacy that people
Right.
talk about all the time. Oh, folic acid is synthetic. Well, it's just as synthetic as alpha tocopherol. If you buy a pill, alpha tocopherol is found in a plant, but it's also found if you make it synthetically. That doesn't mean that the synthetic doesn't work,
Mm.
right? It doesn't work though if you're not deficient in alpha tocopherol. So like if you go back to the thinking of like there's 8 parts in E, I apparently was deficient in one of the other 7 parts.
Mhm.
But folic acid is also where people start to make mistakes too because they're like, "Oh, that's synthetic." Well, it might be, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't work in you. You have a receptor site for folic acid.
Ah, interesting. So, what is the best way to ensure that we're getting all the nutrition we need? Is it eating a balanced diet? Is it eating a balanced diet and supplements? Is it really individual? Or is there like, can you say there's one way that can ensure that we all get enough nutrition?
Um, I actually think it's I'm not going to say impossible, but it's almost impossible, I think, to do it now without some supplementation. And
Mhm.
I say that because the current understanding in nutrition now is something called the triage theory by a researcher named Bruce Ames. And his thinking, and he's now started to show this in rat studies, and one could argue that we're already seeing it in humans, is that, kind of like, probably like you, like we would think like, okay, let's say you're a little bit like, I don't know, magnesium deficient. I would always think that like, okay, so the magnesium would be sprinkled throughout the whole body. Everything would get done. It's just a little bit slower. But what he is seeing and what he had hypothesized initially is that that's not actually what happens. What happens is that your body triages where
Mhm.
magnesium is going to go, picks
Mhm.
one thing more important over something else.
Mhm.
So your heart's more important than your liver. Your red blood cells, because they carry oxygen, more important than your white blood cells.
Mhm.
So certain things will drop off in the thinking evolutionarily that at some point you'll get more magnesium and you'll be fine. But the thing is, most people now are kind of what I would describe as subclinically malnourished. So what happens is we never get full of nutrition. We're never replete. And so then the problem is like we can, and what he shows in rats and what one could say we're seeing in humans is that the rats, when they're given this kind of subclinical deficiency, not stark deficiency like scurvy, but just a little deficiency, is that the rats end up getting the same thing that humans do, like long-term degenerative diseases of like osteoporosis, dementia, and cancer.
Mhm.
So if you understand triage theory, you begin to think like, holy cow, well, how do I make sure that I don't end up with degenerative diseases? Because that's part of the thinking now is just this kind of slow deficiency over time. There's this super interesting study about uh, the mid-Victorian era called "How the Mid-Victorians Ate, Lived, and Died," and the researchers in there they have actual references for this, so I don't think it's really a hypothesis. Is that they showed that people then had 10 times the amount of nutrition than we do, and
Wow.
I know it's a mind-boggling amount, 10 times the amount of nutrition. Now they ate more calories because they were more active, but still, even if it was half that, and they had 10% of the degenerative diseases that we do now. So it's like, okay, so if we think about that, it's like then we're not even close with the food that we have,
Hmm.
which is why I don't think it's really possible to do it without some help.
This has been my experience. It was about 7 years ago that my husband and I found this supplement company. Like, we had been on Trader Joe's supplements, not really
Sure.
seeing a difference. We
It's
had been
better.
on, yeah, it's better than
It's
nothing.
better
But
than nothing, right?
I mean, when I first was diagnosed with chronic adrenal fatigue, that was like such an eye opener, because I just I really thought I was just lazy. Like, it just is me. I'm bad and wrong and lazy and stupid and slow and whatever. Like, I was really beating myself up. And then when I was my chiropractor's wife was an MD who renounced her MD-ness so that she could help people, because she didn't want to give drugs out. She realized that she was really in it for more of a functional
Yeah.
medicine. And this is like back when, I don't even know, I think functional medicine was just in its infancy, because this was like 10 years ago. And
Mhm.
she did that test with me, that, where you spit in these little tubes
Yeah, yeah.
throughout the day. And she was in shock. She said, because she was in the Olympics twice. And
Mm.
she said, I've never seen cortisol levels this low. The only ones that are comparable were mine after I completed the Olympics. And she said, your highest cortisol is what everyone else experiences in the middle of the night when they're sleeping. She goes, "No one."
Flatlined. You're
Yeah,
flatlined.
she goes, "No
Yeah.
wonder you walk around feeling like you're a zombie." And it was like, really, it was a validation. But then what? And and I was, money was tight, and so she's like, "Okay, we'll go to Trader Joe's and buy some B
Mhm.
vitamins." And so I believed him. She really believed that, nutrition was the answer, but it was like quality matters. So I finally found this company that was a lot of like liquid vitamins and liquid minerals, very bioavailable whole foods formulas, and I started to feel like alive again. I started to feel human again. But what I saw in my, and also all like my friends and family that I turned on to the same stuff because they saw me get better. What I saw was that, like, your hair, skin, and nails, those like less essential than your heart and liver, for example,
Mhm.
would, if you stuck with it 3 to 6 months after like beginning taking the supplements, that's when people started to notice their hair became thicker, their nails became stronger, their skin became better. And I said, it's probably because the body is putting the nutrition towards healing the things that are more crucial, right? Because
Mhm.
if you're like Dr. Matthias Rath, who wrote the book "Why Humans Get Heart Attacks and Animals Don't," or something like that.
Mhm.
But he isn't he also German? He said he believed that, vitamin C is because animals can produce their own vitamin C and humans can't, and he had this whole theory about, we're all vitamin C deficient. And he goes, like
Well, that
your
was Linus Pauling's thinking too,
oh
but
yeah, that's right.
that
Well, he worked with
yeah,
Linus Pauling.
but that didn't actually show up in research.
Did
That
it?
didn't
It was
actually
a
s
theory?
no. Yeah, when they've tried to replicate that, they've not actually seen that. That's why the RDA is 75. Right? Is 75 milligrams is because you're not really meant to have a huge bolus of it all the time. You're just supposed to have like a consistent amount, and mostly we don't eat in a way that allows us to have that.
Right. Right. Yeah, and anyways, I was reading all their research and stuff like that, and they were kind of saying, the arteries, for example, right? The body, to create healthy arteries, would need trace amounts of selenium and copper and vitamin C and all these other things that kind of make up elastin and collagen and everything.
Yeah.
And your body's not going to go, oh, well, let's make healthy hair and heal the heart at the same time, because it's like heart crucial, And so I describe it because I'm a kind of a Star Wars, Star Trek, all that kind
Oh
of
yeah, cool. Me
person.
too.
And I say, it's like, Captain Picard says, shut down levels 1 through 5 to divert energy to the shields. And that's sort of how, like, in an epigenetic way, how I see the body is taking nutrition and going, okay, the most important stuff, we're going to put the nutrition to the most important stuff first. And then it turns back on enzymatic processes when more and more nutrition comes in. And it's just fascinating. It's just unbelievably fascinating how this body works when you start to realize you just need to give it the nutrition, and it does so much.
It does, and then we one of the things that I see when I lecture is that, one of the, and I'm often lecturing to healthcare providers, and I have to say to them, like, even then, like, you guys live in a narrow slice of time, and you think it has always been like this, and it has not. Like the number one thing when people are like, well, what's the food I should eat? I'm like, you're not going to like my answer, but it's liver. Liver is like one of the most nutrient dense things you could possibly eat. It has more minerals in it than vegetables, right? But instead, we go on and on about vegetables, and I'm not anti-vegetable. It's just that that's not the only place to get good nutrition.
Now, is there a difference? I mean, it's kind of a silly question, but grass-fed, organic. I mean, can you just buy any liver, or is there a really difference in nutrition depending on what you get?
Well, there's like a good, better, best way to look at things. If I have patients who come and, they're I wouldn't quite say, but some are coming and eating the standard American diet and they're, not surprisingly not feeling great. If I went to them and said like, okay, now you got to buy everything organic and you got to buy like grass-fed everything, like that's like a very steep gradient. So I mostly try to break it up into like a good, better, best thing. So how I look at it is like any liver is better than no liver, right? And then you
Mm.
can kind of go up the chain a little bit and like, okay, and it doesn't matter like chicken versus beef, like all liver's great. But yeah, if you get higher quality stuff, it probably has better nutrition. But this actually reminds me to say that there's a mistaken thinking about that the liver stores toxins. Because, and I have to point out that if the liver did store toxins, then when your liver is 80, if you're 80, your liver would be like gargantuan, but it's not. What your liver does is it conjugates or changes toxins and it has them get excreted through the bowels or
Mhm.
the urine. And so you want your liver in good condition to be able to do that. And there's a whole conversation about stuff like you need some good foods for that. That's why cruciferous vegetables are really important. You have to have good bowels so that you don't reabsorb things because you can do that too. But you want to make sure everything's moving properly. And like, and there's some genetics involved in like people's ability to detox. So there's all of that, but your liver doesn't store toxins. Where you do store toxins is in your fat tissue.
Mhm.
So if you're going to buy bacon, I would say you want to buy good quality bacon because, I don't know where that pig's been.
So when you're eating anything that has animal fat in it, you really want to be conscious of that it's grass-fed or
Well,
pasture-raised
do the best
organic.
you can. I mean, do the best you can. Like when I eat out, if I was restricting myself only to that, it would be, I would, I think in Austin, yeah, because I live here in Austin, Texas, there's like maybe a couple of places that do that. But if I eat out occasionally, then that's fine. But if you eat out a lot, then that probably doesn't work. But this is sort of why, we kind of gently move people over into, what are quick and easy ways to make meals at home? What are, we have a health coach in our office. Like we're always working with like, how can we have people do more cooking at home? Because one of the things that gets us in trouble is we tend to eat out a lot because we say we're in a hurry and we spend more money and it's not as hard as you think to actually have food that's quick. Like tell me what's quicker than having a head of romaine lettuce and a thing of cold cuts. You throw some mayonnaise on the romaine lettuce, you throw some cold cuts in there, you roll it all up, and now you have a sandwich that didn't have to involve bread, has some vegetables in it. Or let's say you make tuna salad and you throw it on like a bed of lettuce. It's like, okay, great. Again, vegetables, protein, low carb, didn't take much. You could buy the tuna salad. You see what I'm saying? Like, there's a good,
Mhm.
better, best way of looking at it. And some people will say, like, well, what about the soy oil and the mayonnaise? I'm like, it's a good, better, best thinking. If we're going to get really rigid about food, we have to, what it'll do is it'll exclude a lot of things. But if you can give people space, then they can adjust to the moving up the scale.
I'm curious, I mean, I have had a lot of guests on the show that have talked about the benefits of the vegan diet, especially plant-based, excluding gluten, excluding a lot of processed foods, obviously. What's your experience? Do you think that diet could be good for some people, good for everyone, not good for everyone?
So plant-based, I'm totally for plant-based, but plant-based, the term when I'm using it is, yeah, I totally think people should have a plant-based diet, but that's what I mean. Plant-based doesn't mean exclusively plants. But I do actually mean that. Like nobody in my world eats enough vegetables. Now, that being said, there is not a single culture that has ever been vegan. If you were vegan as a traditional culture, you would have died without supplementation. Being vegan is not a natural state.
It's interesting. I'm not going to fight you at all
No,
about
no,
this.
no, it's
I
okay.
don't believe in any one diet dogma. I believe that everyone needs to find their answer, right? And I think that everyone should kind of play around with their diet till they hone in their health, right? And whether,
Hmm.
find their path that way, but always keep an open mind, because I've seen people who eat one way for 10 years and then it's like it was working for them and then it stopped working for them. And so we have to always, adjust and find like what's better for us. Always find what's better. But you've got people like in Loma Linda, California, who are incredibly healthy vegans, that whole population of Seventh-day Adventists. What about them?
Well, so I have a whole course on how to analyze research. So one of the
Ooh.
things that that nutrition research is always kind of a challenge with is that a lot of it is observational based. Observational doesn't mean it's wrong, but what we're looking at is an observation of which there are other factors involved, right? So when somebody is eating a mostly plant-based diet, and that culture in particular, that group of people, they have a very high community interaction, very strong. That's actually social isolation, which is the opposite of what they have. They have a strong community. Social isolation is actually considered to be as damaging for your health as smoking and obesity. So one could argue that like just having a good community around makes a difference.
Mm.
Right? So, and that's just one example. It's like people who they also exercise more, right? They also have, I mean, there's a bunch of different factors that when you're looking at observational studies, you're not actually calculating. And you have to take out factors, which is a whole bunch of like special math, but then it changes things. So, what I tend to look at is what are traditional cultural examples in cultures that had not been exposed to modern Western foods? Right. So now that doesn't really exist any longer. But if you go back far enough, they were doing research about this already. So as a vegan lifestyle, there's not a single example because if you restrict yourself that much, you would have died of B12 deficiency. The biggest deficiencies are B12 deficiency, zinc deficiency, iron is super high, vitamin A as retinol, not beta carotene, is also super high. There tend to be quite a few deficiencies, right? B12 is the most well known, but the other ones are close seconds, right? So if you didn't take those, you would not actually be able to replicate as a culture. So I'm not saying don't eat plants. I'm saying vegan doesn't work. Now, if you're being like eating more plant-based and you were like a lacto-ovo vegetarian or you were like eggs and occasionally fish, I think that's great. Like that's, often just adding some protein like that, animal protein. I mean, that's why they say plant proteins are not complete proteins. They're not complete. Now, that being said, I wrote an article on my website about how we don't eat meat well. I'm not a huge proponent of meat either. I'm not a proponent of high protein diets. What I see is that we don't manage meat well in a lot of ways. So when people say to me, because the China study always comes up, they say, well, animal protein causes cancer. And I'm like, let me talk to you about let me talk to you about that. Again, if we go to a traditional culture, if you can come up with an exception to that statement, then that statement is incorrect. So if animal protein or plants, the flip side of that is plants prevent cancer. It's like, okay, so let's look at the Inuit Eskimos. So the Inuit survived. You couldn't grow stuff in the permafrost because you couldn't grow vegetables, you couldn't grow grain, you couldn't grow anything, right? So the only kind of plant food they had was like seaweed, and then the moose would eat lichen, and then it would pre-digest it in the moose's stomach, and they'd have some of that, right? Mostly their diet was sea vegetables and sea animals and some land animals, right? And before we brought our modern foods in, their cancer rate was 0.01%.
Wow.
So you cannot say animal protein causes cancer. You can say that maybe it's something we're doing. Like we do not treat our, if you're eating conventional meat, that's not well treated meat. That's been fed differently, that's been butchered differently, and then you're taking that meat and you're only eating the muscle meat. The meat actually has the least amount of nutrition to it. The Native Americans, when they had an excess of food, would throw the muscle meat to the dogs because it has so little nutrition. The organs are much higher. right? So is it that we're only eating muscle meat and we don't eat the organ meats anymore?
Hmm.
Is it that we're taking that protein and we're putting it into a system that for a lot of people is high sugar? Right? Is it that we're putting that meat into a system that's also nutrient deficient? I mean, there's a whole bunch of different factors there, but like, okay, why do people who eat more, animal protein have some observational higher cancer rates? It's like, well, we do a lot of things wrong. There's a whole genetics element about like, do people detox the chemicals from smoked meat and grilled meat? There are genetics for that.
Oh,
So it's
interesting.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, actually a super. I mean, that's why they say grilled meat can cause cancers because it actually chemically looks almost exactly the same as the tar from cigarette smoke. I have a whole specialty in genetics. Like nutrigenomics is the genetics related to nutritional elements. So the detoxification I was talking about is part of that. Being able to detox secondhand smoke is also the same genes that are trying to deal with the chemicals from grilled meat, like that Burger King commercial where the flames are leaping up and caressing that hamburger. Yeah, that's like the worst chemical you can stick in your body. Well, maybe not the worst, but it's pretty bad.
Isn't it like heterocyclic amines?
Yeah, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons.
Right.
So the AHAs and the PAHs, it's all that.
Don't eat burnt meat.
Yeah, right. So you can see there's a whole lot of stuff that we do about meat that doesn't work. Everybody has a picture of the caveman like, roasting something over an open spit, and that's not accurate actually. How traditional cultures really cooked meat was like wet cooking, like in soups or stews, or they steamed it, right? And so, we don't do any of those things. So how we eat meat now might be part of the reason that we have trouble, but it's not correct to say that meat causes cancer.
And you talked about how people cook it. What about frying? The damage that eating fried foods are so prolific now. Were fried foods part of ancient cultures the way they are now?
No, no, but then so here's my question I'll ask you, and this is for your audience too. Is like, so what's actually wrong? I actually have this in a lecture. I have a big picture of fried chicken. I'm like, what's wrong with this picture? And people have all sorts of answers. They're like, oh, well, it's, the chicken was, treated a certain way or fed soy or whatever. And then they'll say, "Oh, it's because, chicken skin's bad for you. Oh, it's the breading that's on the thing." And and then finally actually what's wrong with fried chicken is or fried anything, it's the actual oils that it's fried in. That's the problem. So when people say like, "Well, fried food is bad." I'm like, "Well, what part of it's actually bad?" And I make people think because it's such an automatic thing for us to say, "Oh, fried food's bad." Well, what exactly are you referring to? Do you see what I'm saying? Like if you
Right.
break it down into the pieces, it's like, I don't know, what if you took this is what I actually will do. I'll take chicken livers and chop them up into little pieces and then roll them in some like coconut flour and salt and pepper and then deep fry them in coconut oil. Okay, so there's not a single part of that that's problematic.
Really? There's no like oxidative damage from the coconut
Well,
oil?
no, not if you get so I don't use the virgin because the proteins in there make for a lower cooking temperature. I'll use avocado oil, which is a higher temperature, or a the refined coconut oil. So that'll be a higher temperature, and that actually works okay. Now, what you were saying about traditional cultures, though, is like there's a difference. They actually describe it as like wet cooking versus dry cooking. So wet cooking is like the steaming, braising, putting in stews, like those kinds of things. And then what we do often nowadays is dry cooking. We'll throw it on a grill or we'll put it in bake it in the oven. Like all of that stuff, like dry cooking is really not the best thing for protein. So they'll say, there's some ways that you can protect the meat by adding like a vinegar um, to the marinades. Like if you marinate it ahead of time with lemon juice or vinegar or things like that, that really can protect it quite a bit. And then also cooking it at a little bit of a lower temperature.
Yeah, because I'm always worried about that smoke point.
Right.
If
Yeah, you're totally right to have a worry about it.
so start low and increase the temperature slowly. I'm kind of one of those extremists. I'll just like turn the pan on high and then and then my
And
pan's
then walk
smoking.
away from it, right?
Right, totally. I could burn water. I mean, seriously.
Yeah, if you keep it on a low temp, then it doesn't go quite so fast. But you see what I'm saying? Like one of the things that I'm really committed to is teaching people critical thinking because we often will, I'm not picking on vegans. I'm just saying, like as an example, a lot of times people will quote things from me that are from a vegan site. But that's not critically thinking. Like if you really want to know about what works or doesn't work about a statement or a hypothesis, is what I do is I go to Google and I'm like, let's say vegan criticism, right? And I'll just, then some sites will come up and I'll see, are they well referenced? Are they from people who might know something, like versus just somebody's opinion, right? And just kind of see like what are the criticisms about statements and theories that people have out there, because otherwise all we're learning is from people who agree with us, which is not very helpful.
But it's so much fun.
It's so much easier, right?
It's so much
Oh,
easier to not have to challenge our own way of thinking, right?
right. It's like I'm still right, and look, I'm still right. It's like, of course, it's easy, right?
Do you know Plato's allegory of the cave?
I
It,
probably have heard of it, but say it
it's
again.
so the allegory of the cave. It's beautiful. I mean, everyone can Google it. It's not beautiful. It's tragic, but it's beautiful in that it so accurately describes how we feel. And we are all chained in a cave, and we've been there a whole life, and our enslavers are behind us casting shadows on the wall, and we've never seen the light of day. We've only experienced this two-dimensional world of shadows, of black and white, and maybe cave colors, right? And one day I escape, or you escape, right? And we pull off our chains, we run outside, and we see color and dimension, and it's just amazing. It's blowing our mind. We can't believe it. We run back into the cave and tell all the other people we were, chained in the cave, that this whole world exists, and they get so angry that they kill us.
Ooh,
And this is the allegory of the cave, is like when you have this awakening, right? And then you try to go back to those people who, you grew up with, or who, were in that kind of old way of thinking. They can't handle it. They can't handle this truth, because they didn't escape themselves yet. So they didn't see the light, and you're trying to tell them there's this other world. And so
yeah.
until someone's ready to make the journey themselves, they'll get really angry that their reality is being challenged. And so it's this weird dance we have to do when we feel like we found the answer. We want to scream it from the rooftop, but people will get upset because you're challenging their way of thinking before they're ready to look at other ways of thinking, or maybe accept that their way of thinking is not complete or
Well,
flawed.
they don't have to listen to me. It's just that but when you said something very interesting when we started. You're like, oh, and then people after 10 years change how they might be doing because it doesn't work anymore. It's like, yeah. So it'll go faster if you don't take supplements. If you want to be vegan and not take supplements, your breakdown will be faster. But at some point you will break down, and that's a certainty. You cannot go for that long a period being deficient in a multitude of different vital. I mean, zinc is used in 300 enzymes, right? So
Mm.
so, I'm just saying, you might consider looking at what did traditional cultures do that were well, right? And there's certain things that were always the same. So and people will say, oh, but what about the Hindu culture? They were vegetarian. It's like, well, because I'm all about research, which is interesting. There was a researcher in London who looked at that actually, and he's like, well, okay, so they're vegetarian. So how come in India that group does not have megaloblastic anemia, B12 deficiency, but the same group that emigrated to London eating exactly the same food does have it?
Oh, because the food's clean in London,
Yes.
right? And the
Yes.
B12 is from bacteria, and so in India
Not
it
even
was.
bacteria. It's worse than that.
Oh,
It's
really?
bugs and bug feces in the
Oh,
grains.
fun.
Well, so you grind that up, and it's just enough of a source of B12 that it prevented B12 deficiency. But in London, when the food was really clean, they got B12 deficiency, right? So then if we look at cultures that were eating whatever combination of foods they had, it was always different. But there were certain things that were the same. Like people really valued organ meats because they're really, really nutrient dense. You can look at England. They weren't really that keen on eating vegetables for a while, and then their teeth started falling out of their head because they didn't have enough vitamin C, right?
Right.
So they learned that's where the scurvy thing came from, right? So, you learn some things. But traditional cultures always they made sure their oils were really good. They tended to always have fermented foods, like, certain things that we don't, some of those things have had a bit of a resurgence now. You can see much more fermented food on the shelves of kind of the higher end groceries and people drinking kombucha, and that's all great. Right? So those are kind of moves back to what people traditionally did, maybe without so much sugar, but you got the picture, right?
Hmm.
And even eating organ meats, like there's more grass-fed stuff available online, for people to try rather than because if their butcher doesn't carry it, they might want to try it and get some high quality stuff. So there's, traditional cultures did things differently. Oh, here's another one. They would always soak, sprout, or ferment their grains.
Hmm.
Like we don't do that. We just buy flour and we do something with that, right? It's not soaked or sprouted. And the problem is all of those grains are seeds, and those seeds have digestive inhibitors on them. Because, a bird, as I put it, a bird eats a seed, and that seed would like to survive the bird's digestive tract to get pooped out at the end and grow. So it needs to survive the bird's digestive tract. So it has on it things called digestive inhibitors, and they cause trouble for people. Phytic acid is specifically what I'm talking about. And so people who eat a lot of grains that are not soaked or sprouted can often get deficiencies because phytic acid prevents the absorption of a bunch of different minerals.
Is saying phytates the same as saying phytic acid?
It is.
Okay.
Yes, that will be anything. You can say, lactate is lactic acid. So
Okay.
it's just another way that they talk about biochemistry. I know it doesn't make sense, but it just confuses everybody, but yes.
Right. We have you here to clarify, so it's all good. I heard once that we should take our mineral supplements away from meals to prevent phytates from preventing our ability to absorb the
Absolutely.
minerals.
That's the danger about eating unsoaked grains, nuts, and seeds or unsprouted because the phytic acid is still there and it will prevent the absorption of minerals. And that's a standard nutrition understanding. In basic nutrition, it will tell you that in a, here you're learning how to coach people, like make sure they don't take their multivitamin with, high phytate meals. It's like, yeah, because it prevents absorption. And so the thing is, traditional cultures, figured that out. I don't know how, but they did. And so you always soaked or sprouted things and then, or fermented them. And then we don't do that anymore. We take shortcuts. And then this is another way when people say, well, why do I need to take supplements? Like, because there's a bunch of ways that you get deficient and you have no idea.
Right.
You have no idea. You have no idea eating how
Right.
much eating sugar causes deficiency,
Let's talk
right?
about that for a sec. So eating sugar and people go, "Oh, I don't eat sugar," but then we actually look at their diet and it's just like full of sugar because sugar is hidden in everything. I did a minimum of at least 30 days with absolute zero, zero, zero processed
Mm.
sugar. And it was like, okay, I had to look at every ingredient and then know all the secret words for sugar, like
Right.
dextrose, fructose, like all those secret words, right? And so I had a really hard time finding hot sauces. And I'm like, what do you mean? I pick something up, second ingredient, cane sugar, agave, like what
Yeah.
fructose. I'm like, I just want hot sauce, and so it's in everything. And people
Hmm.
think that they don't eat sugar because they don't eat pastries or chocolate bars, but even bread has sugar in it. Sauces, have sugar in it. So, when we consume sugar, and now you're talking about processed sugar, you're also talking about like fruit sugar, like natural, like carbohydrates.
Well, those are three things you just said there. So I when so I wrote a book about reversing diabetes. So I tend to, just as a little heads up, tend to be wanting people to eat lower carb than they're typically doing.
Mm-hmm.
Then when I say low carb, it's not nearly as low carb as people think, but I laugh slightly because it's kind of a more normal range. It's just compared to how people eat, it actually seems quite constrained. So, but I include fruit in that because fructose, as I put it, would have been fine had we left it in fruit, but we don't. We take six oranges and we juice that, and we think that's the same thing as eating an orange. And it is not. It is a high fructose product, just like soda.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the problem with fructose is it does not metabolize the same way glucose does. Fructose gets metabolized through the liver in the same pathways as alcohol.
Oh,
So if you drink,
wow.
so if you drink a lot of alcohol, you get fatty liver disease, and if you do a lot of fructose, you get non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. This is the problem with fructose that people don't realize. And so then people will say, "Oh, well, I don't do sodas and I don't do fruit juice." I'm like, "Okay, well, the other place that you get sugar is in the actual white sugar or brown, it doesn't matter, the sugar molecule. Sucrose is half glucose, half fructose. So if you do a lot of sugar, you'll get a bunch of fructose like that. Or if you try to get a sugar substitute, agave nectar is 90% fructose.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do a lot of that, honey, this is why I have to tell people about honey. Like honey in the traditional times, you had to fight bees for honey. Okay. But you don't now. Now you can just go to Whole Foods and turn a tap and fill the thing and turn your beer upside down and say, "Oh, but it's all natural." It's like, okay, but not the way we're eating it. So again, you just end up with a kind of overload of something that if we had just left it in the orange and occasionally had fruit, it'd be okay. And in fact, one of the problems with fructose, never mind how it metabolizes, but it turns into fat faster than any other sugar.
Oh.
So if people do a lot of fructose, they can really get into some trouble. And in fact, one I've heard this a couple of times from researchers in functional medicine saying, like, maybe that's the reason we have so much fruit in the summer, is it fattens us up for the winter.
Oh, interesting.
So I just tell people don't go crazy with fruit. It would be best if you like kept it seasonal, and one of the
Mm-hmm.
things in the United States is I'm beginning to see like people don't know what's seasonal. They think apples are available all year, and they think that if they buy an apple in like July, that apple, just because it says Washington State, if they think it was grown at that time of the year, but it
Mm-mm.
wasn't. It might have been grown in Washington State, but it's been sitting in cold storage for about 9 months,
Yep.
right? And so
Absolutely.
so we eat everything.
I live in Washington, and you can
Oh,
tell that it's an old apple from 9 months ago because you cut into it and immediately starts turning brown, but when you get the
yeah.
fresh apples, I mean, geez, it could sit out for minutes and
Yes.
not turn brown, and you just know
No.
that. I just wonder, like, are we even getting nutrition? I mean, because they or you buy grapes and you realize they came from Brazil and they had to or avocado or whatever, and they came from halfway around the world. They had to pick it before it was ready to be picked so it could survive transit and wait in the
Yeah,
grocery
and
store
I
for you to
and
buy
I
it.
point out that they didn't fly that stuff here. No. So, it was on a
Right.
boat, right? So yeah, and
Mm,
that's one of my complaints too is that we buy food from halfway across the world, which is like talk about the carbon imprint for that,
right.
footprint for that is unbelievable. So I won't buy anything like that. Absolutely. Completely not. If it's coming from New Zealand, that's ridiculous. But if I will try to buy local and I try to buy seasonal and and I'll make exceptions when I mean cherries, you notice cherries don't keep. So that's why you don't get to see cherries like except at cherry time.
Right.
Peaches also, right? Certain things just are only available at that period of time and then that's that.
But it's also fun. That's what makes it fun. Like I love asparagus season. My husband, it's his favorite vegetable, and so the second asparagus season's in, and you know it's fresh and it's local and it's organic. Like I would just gorge on asparagus, and
Yeah.
and it's fun. And I love okra. And up here, it's like you blink and it's not in the grocery store anymore. So I relish the seasonal experience of food, and you can Google, sort of like your area and what's local and what's seasonal. I have a grocery store called PCC. It's like a really local co-op here, and they will have a chart to show you what you can buy that's going to come when things come into season, so
Yeah.
that you can get excited for, the thatch uh peppers or whatever, right?
Mhm.
And then you can kind
Mhm.
of plan out, right? Like
Yeah.
we know pumpkins are not going to be available in March, right? It's just or
Right.
and so we just have to plan it, but it's fun because then it really spices up our diet, that we can play around with different dishes seasonally. And well, what do you think about frozen? Like if we're looking to get the
Frozen's
most
great.
nutrition, so to get the most nutrition out of our food, and we're living in a place that it's like in the middle of winter or whatever, and obviously no local vegetables are being grown. Like I'm from Canada, so it was like six months of the year covered in snow. um so frozen organic vegetables are the best in terms of getting your nutrition.
Yeah, they could be really good. Traditional cultures, or not even that long ago, would can things, so that's how you could have vegetables all year. But yes, nowadays we get to freeze them, and the advantage is that they freeze them typically on the fields the day that they've been harvested. So, I live in the middle of the country. So when I go to Whole Foods and I'm like, "Oh, look, organic broccoli from California." Well, that's great, except that as I pointed out, they didn't fly that broccoli over here. They put it on a truck and it probably took a week, and by the time it gets here, it doesn't have any more vitamin C.
Mm.
But if they flash froze it, then it will keep a lot of the compounds there. So that's one of the main reasons to buy local is because it didn't have to get transported, so you don't lose as many nutrients. But
Excellent.
going but going back to the sugar thing, right? So that's the whole thing about fructose. And then I often, when I speak about sugar, I tend to kind of use the word carbs and sugar a little interchangeably because carbs for people um, are no, I know that a lot of people are like all pro whole grains, and that works if you're not having blood sugar issues. If you're
Hmm.
somebody who's has blood sugar issues, whole grains are, yes, they totally come with more fiber and they come with more nutrients, and that's great. But when somebody has a blood sugar issue that involves insulin and overreaction of insulin, and then ultimately leads to diabetes, whole grains won't work for them any longer. So I often have to kind of really work with people about eating lesser carbs, even the good ones.
A friend of mine texted me the other day and said, what do you think about amaranth? And because I've been gluten free for 7 years, and I've never really gravitated towards a lot of new grains after I went gluten free. I just was like, okay, guys, let's just tone down the grains in general. And so I looked into it, and I couldn't believe it was over 100 grams of carbs for 1 cup of amaranth.
It's still a carb. I don't know why people are surprised. They think that like just because it's like a whole
An
grain,
ancient grain. It's an
yeah,
ancient
like
grain,
okay, great, but that doesn't mean it's not a grain,
right?
right? So yeah, people are always a bit surprised because quinoa also, oh, high protein. I'm like, you should check the carb count on that as well, just so you know. Quinoa is also could be quite high.
And what about like beans and lentils and all
So
those wonderful things that are good for like vegetarian proteins?
yeah, well, so when I talk to people about carb intake. One of the things that I kind of describe as I, talk about the progression of how people end up diabetic. And by diabetic, I mean at the age of 65, this is according to the CDC, 77% of adults are diabetic or pre-diabetic.
Oh, that is just crazy.
Well, because it's simply a matter of time. When somebody is having blood sugar issues, it started back in the 20s and 30s, in their ages, 20s and 30s, right? So to get to 65 is like, it's just time. And how I describe it is like, it's like you're given a certain amount of points for carbs in your lifetime. And most people who are older are done by the age of 35. But the younger generation, I now see it's like in the 20s,
Hmm.
right? It's because if you grew up and you ate a bunch of desserts or you know, you drank soda was in your house, things like that, or you were inactive, things like that. So you have ripped through your points a bit faster. And so actually a lot of babies and kids now get a lot more sugar than I did as a child. And I didn't not have sugar. My mom, but we typically made it. So, but there was we didn't eat low carb. I had macaroni and cheese. It's just my mom would made homemade macaroni and cheese, right? So, but anyway, so you fast forward and people are kind of out of points. So when I'm just kind of describing for people like how to deal with carbs, it's like I don't say because I'm not crazy enough to tell somebody no sugar. Like that just doesn't work. But what I say is I'm going to give you kind of a guideline on how many carbs to have, and the list includes things like fruit. It includes beans. It includes bad things, and I'm quoting air quoting as I say, and good things like oatmeal. And I say that because when somebody has blood sugar issues, it does not matter what kind of carb it is, it's still problematic. And the reason fruit's on there is because fruit doesn't cause an insulin reaction, but high fructose will damage the liver, which speeds up your chances of getting diabetes. But it's also when people's palates are really accustomed to sweet things,
Hmm.
they'll eat a lot more fruit. This is what Weight Watchers saw because about I don't know, it was 4 or 5 years ago, they changed their policy, and where everything had points, they now made fruit free. And then about a year later, I saw an interview with one of the spokespeople because people were complaining that they didn't get the same results as they had in the past. And
Ooh.
he was like, "Well, we didn't really think that people would go too crazy on fruit." And I was reading; it was the actual newspaper I was reading. I looked at the newspaper, like, "What are you kidding me? People who are really like wanting sweet, like a disc addicted to food, like who wouldn't eat 3 bananas a day?"
Hmm.
Right? So it's kind of looking at like some things that are healthy, like oatmeal, might not work for somebody who's out of points. That's how I describe it.
Right.
When most of us are out of points.
So when you say at a points, do you mean like the body is running on fumes in terms of its nutrition that is needed to process sugar?
No, I mean that the body has gone into the next stage of predicting that you now eat a lot of carbs. This happens probably in, the 30s, people's 30s. The body starts to predict you're eating a lot of carbs because you've spent some time doing that before that. And one of the things that it does is it overreacts with insulin. And that's
Mhm.
actually one of the it is actually the first marker on a blood test to see if somebody is starting to have too high of a carb intake is fasting insulin. And most doctors won't run it. But if you do, we want fasting insulin under 6, right? And then I had a woman come in the other day and she brought her son. Her son is 11 and he's a little bit pudgy and his fasting insulin was a 35. Right?
Oh.
And so then I see, so this now they come in a second time, right? And so the mom, I said, well, what kind of, adjustments have you made? She's like, I realized that when I grew up, I always had a couple of cookies after school. And so I buy 2 packs of cookies when I go to the grocery store, but I can't do that anymore because I come in and a whole pack will be gone. And I'm like, yeah,
Mm.
it doesn't work, right? Because it just doesn't work. He can't tolerate that. And so this is why the group of adolescents as a kind of a whole group is the fastest growing group for diabetes. 1 in 4 teenagers is diabetic or pre-diabetic.
Oh my gosh.
It's really high. And it's especially problematic because the medications that they use for adults actually don't work on children and they don't know why. And so then that creates a huge problem because there's no way to sort of artificially lower their blood sugar like with metformin or anything like that. They just don't work as well with kids at all. In fact, some of the research are seeing that there's at a certain point the medications simply stop working.
Wow. I was on metformin once and it made me
Yeah.
so sick. Thank goodness it made me so sick. I was throwing up. And so I
Ooh.
was like, okay, this is like, I mean, it gave me every symptom, like, or every side effect. Like, you look at the list of side effects, it's crazy. And the list of side effects, it includes hyper and hypoglycemia. Like, it's a
Yeah.
drug that's supposed to manage that and it actually can give you that. So, no, it made me so sick and I'm so happy. I mean, it made me feel like I was out of my body, like, just unbelievable. So I'm
Mm.
really thankful that it made me sick because it forced me to, because I know didn't want to get on insulin, right? Like I didn't want to go down that route. And this
Mhm.
was before I really understood all the holistic stuff. I was, kind of buying into the allopathic world, but I'm like, okay,
Sure.
this medication doesn't work. I need to figure out a different way. And, thank goodness, because it had me start to look in this direction. And now I can say that out of all the health issues I've resolved in my life, diabetes was the easiest. Because
It
it
is.
just took a commitment to go through the cupboards, change everything. I mean, it's just once you commit, it's like getting on a it's like the hardest part of going for a bike ride is putting your shoes on, right? But once you've committed and you're walking towards your bike, everything is downhill. The hardest thing is just deciding to do it, deciding to put your shoes on. Because I can't tell you
And
how
leave the house.
right, and leave the house. I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many times I've like all the intentions of the world of going to the gym, and the hardest part is putting on the shoes and actually walking out the door, getting in the car. Once you're driving to the gym, everything's downhill because you know you're gonna get there, you're gonna get on the machine, whatever. But once I committed and I changed my diet and got on these, amazing mineral and vitamin supplements, and it was night and day. And it was so
Mhm.
easy to reverse diabetes. I could not believe it. And I've never looked back. Um, I felt like a new person, changing my diet and going low carb, like responsible carbs, but like looking
Yeah.
towards whole foods for my carbs. So like vegetables, like you said,
Yes.
can't eat enough vegetables, right? Just pounds of vegetables. Being responsible with fruit. I can really listen to my body, and I can feel like, even with fruit, like if I have too much, I can feel that sugar rush
Yeah.
from eating fruit. And it's like, not that I don't have blood sugar imbalance anymore, thank goodness, but I can, like, I notice, like, I can get like a little high from fruit, because
Mhm.
once you're so what if you're eating the standard American diet, fruit, you just don't even notice when you eat fruit,
Mhm.
because you're used to like the extreme high of Coca-Cola or whatever. But when you kind of fine tune your diet, your body becomes so clean that you can start to really hear the symptoms of your body talk to you.
Hmm.
Now, do you buy into the glycemic index? Do you believe that that is a viable thing that we should consider looking at when determining what foods to eat?
It's not the best thing. It's in fact, it's so much not the best thing that the American Diabetes Association, not of which I'm a fan, but still, they don't recommend the glycemic index because here's the problem, and it brings up something I was going to mention earlier. Is like when you said, well, what about beans and things like that? I'm like, well, the two biggest offending groups of high carb intake are vegetarians and athletes. I used to race bicycles. We invented carbo loading. So by
Mm-hmm.
golly, I know carbs, right? So there's that. And then for, vegetarians are like, no, I mean, and interestingly, one of my textbooks in graduate school for nutrition said American vegetarians are known for not eating vegetables
Oh,
because
right.
bread's vegetarian, pasta's vegetarian, right? It's not that beans are bad. It's just that I had a 43-year-old guy who came in one time, 43, new girlfriend, complaining to me that he has low testosterone symptoms. I'm like, well, that's kind of weird because he's 43 and he has a new girlfriend, right? And so then what we distinguish is that he is doing 1,000 grams of carbs a day. And I'm quoting him. I've never forgotten this because he said, well, I'm eating plates of rice, plates of beans, plates of pasta because I thought I was supposed to. Right. So it had changed he had high estrogen, and estrogen opposes that can come from insulin resistance. And then that in men can oppose the action of testosterone. So he had these low testosterone symptoms. So he eventually decided he couldn't be like responsibly vegetarian. And so he started eating a little bit more meat, which allowed him to then also change his, the ratios of the food he's eating, he ate more vegetables, and then things were fine and he was good after that. So yeah, it's a whole problem. It's going back to the glycemic index. One of the challenges also of this is that it has to do with serving size. So low glycemic index brown rice. Yeah, it's more low glycemic. Low glycemic is mostly, not always, but mostly referring to a higher fiber content in that. But you can go look up glycemic index in Wikipedia, and it will tell you with some crazy things in there. Like it depends on, like if you use potatoes, it depends on the type of potato, how long it's been stored, how it's been cooked, what you're eating it with, and then of course going back to serving size. So a serving size of rice is a third of a cup. Now, the last time I went to an right, the last time I went to an Asian restaurant, that's not what I got.
Oh, yeah, the serving size of avocado is 1/5 of an avocado.
Yes, but nobody got diabetes from avocados, right? So I'm like, eat all the avocados you want. Nor do I care about carrots and beets because I want people to retain some common sense about their food,
Mm.
right? Nobody got diabetes from carrots. So when people say, "Oh, they've got lots of sugar in them," like not like a Pop Tart. So so I don't care about that either. I care about like carb dense things. So my list of that's in my book is about like carb dense things. So things that make sense, like bread and pasta and cereal, crackers, chips. But fruits on the list, beans is on the list. Beer is liquid bread. That's a heartbreaker for people.
Mm.
Wine actually has much less carbs than people realize. Because when you make wine, people are always like, "Oh, wine has sugar in it." I'm like, if you know how to make wine, when you you take the grapes, which do have fructose in them, you squash the grapes, right? And then you put the yeast in to ferment it, but the yeast has to eat something. So it eats the fructose and then excretes alcohol, basically.
Yeah.
So if you are drinking like dry wines, they actually are quite low in carbs.
But it's also alcohol, and there's
Alcohol has
really, I
seven
mean,
calories per gram.
there's
Hmm.
no amount of alcohol that's, healthy because the liver has to deal with it, so,
Well, then
so
how do you explain that, like, across the board, all the big studies, and by big I mean hundreds of thousands of people, those studies show that when people drink moderate amounts of alcohol, they tend to do better. They live longer and they have less disease.
I can't explain that. It doesn't make sense to
I
me.
know. Nobody could explain it, but there's something there, right? And so, sometimes people say, "Well, I saw some study that talked about, alcohol causes breast cancer." I'm like, "I know the study you're talking about. I actually pulled the research to look at it, and the study you're talking about also pointed out that the women were folic acid deficient. If you're
Mm.
folate deficient, here we're back to the lactate and the lactic acid, folate and folic acid, right? So if you're folic acid deficient, you would then have a higher chance of getting cancer of any kind. Alcohol is simply a little bit of a pressure on the system. So if you want to drink alcohol, what I would really recommend is you make sure that you are nutrient sufficient.
Mm.
Interesting, yeah, because I love wine and I drink it, but I also take stuff.
We're kind of circling around. We're going to get back to talking about what sugar does to the body and how we process it and how it depletes in nutrients. But I want to ask, uh, since we're on the subject, what about artificial sweeteners? And I'm not talking about stevia. I'm talking about
No.
like the chemical ones because you mentioned drinking soda is, like you is as bad as, juicing oranges and drinking that. What about the impact that artificial sweeteners have in these diet drinks?
So, so I wrote a paper about this for graduate school because I had the impression that from things that you read, that they cause an insulin reaction and they cause weight gain in people. And I wanted to actually see what the research was. And the assignment was to go delve into some topic and dig out all the research and see what was actually so. And I have to say, I had to change my mind. Now, I'm not a proponent of chemicals in the larger scheme of when I'm looking at somebody's health, if they come in and they're eating, I'm just sort of facetiously saying Pop Tarts, but they're eating, however they're eating, and they're drinking Diet Coke. The Diet Coke is not giving them diabetes. Now, the Diet Coke might be doing other things, but it's not causing their blood sugar issue at the moment. So the question then comes down to if I have a patient who comes in, well, since I'm just about to rearrange their entire diet and have them like eat lower carb and pay attention to this and pay attention to that, maybe in that first visit, I don't rip away the Diet Coke. You see, because I'd like this patient to come back to me, and if I do that, they might not. But I work. It's like that good, better, best thing. You start where people are, and then you
Hmm.
just sort of like educate them as time goes on, right? So the challenge with diet sodas and really any processed food like those, they're really engineered to be addictive. And there was a really good book by Michael Moss called Salt, Sugar, Fat: How the Food Giants um, fooled us or tricked us or something like that. It's a super good book, and it gives you an idea of like exactly what they do to make these foods and drinks really addictive for people. So, like I said, I'm trying to pick my priorities. From a chemical
Hmm.
perspective, I think I'm not. It's not very helpful. From a perspective of does it cause weight gain or does it cause an insulin reaction? Well, I had to change my mind because it does not cause an insulin reaction. What it does do is it does not satisfy the reward center in your brain, so people will tend to still want something. Uh, what it will do is for some people it will cause them to lose weight because they do save calories on from drinking regular soda. Some people will gain weight, but that's mostly because they saved the calories and then they spent them someplace else.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, when I looked at all these big studies, I had to kind of change my mind and say, like, okay, well, from a perspective of blood sugar, the diet soda is probably not as much of a problem as I thought it was.
My husband, when I met him, I mean, he was a project for me. He was eating sugar and all that kind of stuff, but he was drinking Monster energy drinks at work.
Oh,
And I thought I was so smart. I got him to switch to diet. And
hmm
he was a specialized foreman union carpenter. He'd have to look at blueprints and he would put up ceiling grids and very specialized. He, if you know the Vidara building in Las Vegas, that was his. He was the foreman for that project for all of the anything hanging from the ceiling, and he installed this giant art piece in the lobby. So anyway, he came home and he said, I couldn't do my job today. He goes, I've been doing, was doing it for 20 years. He goes, I couldn't do math. I couldn't do basic math. And he could look, I mean, any day of the week, you could show him a blueprint and he'd be able to tell you all like to the millimeter what he needed, that kind of thing. And, um, and then it reminded me that my mom had this problem when she would eat or drink things she was allergic to. She couldn't do basic math. Like you, two plus two, did she didn't know what it was. And so I started to look into it and I said to him, it's the diet Monster energy drinks. You need to stop drinking them.
how much
And
was he doing?
he was drink one or two, but it was whatever was in it. So, but the regular Monster energy drinks didn't affect him. He drank the diet ones, and he couldn't do basic math. He couldn't do any
Yeah.
math, and so it's a neurotoxin. Like it's like just a neurodisruptor, whatever.
Hmm.
But that was kind of right at the beginning of me sort of like getting into being interested in holistic health and diving into it. And I thought that was fascinating that drinking a diet drink could affect someone's ability to think.
Right, which, then I look at like some people can function and some people can't. And so this is always where I'm like, this is where, when I have time, I delve into the research. I'm like, okay, well, so what's the evidence for neurotoxicity? Because I have heard that. I haven't looked at the evidence. And I would be interested. It's like, so is there a genetic susceptibility to that? Like, is it like a
Mm,
kind of like the alcohol is like a nutritional deficiency susceptibility. Like I'm just interested in things like that because I tend to go into things, I'd like to think, with not a really formed idea. Like I can't even say sugar is evil because if I was on a deserted island, sugar could probably save my life. Right. So
right.
I really have no idea. So I can't just say something is good or bad. Mostly it has to be some context to it. So if I can keep an open mind and just look at what's research. And so this is the thing, like mostly people don't know how to find the research or read the research. And the research, like I said, I have a whole lecture on that because it's, if you knew what was wrong with research, it would make your hair stand on end. Like
Mhm.
there's all sorts of craziness that goes on in research as well. So, you know,
Yeah, because we only see what the newspapers report to us.
yeah, and
And
that's not the actual research in the
right.
newspapers. I mean, I could just go on and on. Like, so there's on my website, there's a free webinar on that topic. So
Great.
because
Tell us how to find it. So,
it's on,
meritwellness.com,
uh,
where do
and
we
then
go to find that?
under lectures, and so
Great.
there's a free webinar there to take a look at that. Somebody recorded that, and it's I've even upgraded it since then. My husband and I, because he has the same qualifications I do, we work in the same practice. He and I just finished this fantastic, huge video project that is it's not for the average person. It's for healthcare providers or for people who are, really avid nutritionists, people who want to be really in nutrition. And it's a 1 year certification program with 2 modules a month. Each module has about 4 videos, and we made 4,168 slides. It's the equivalent of 10 8-hour lectures. It was an enormous project, but we put everything in that we learned from our graduate degree, from our clinical experience, from our, we're certified practitioners in functional medicine. So all of that, we put all of that in there and then like clarified it and boiled it down so that people could really understand it. So one whole module is just for research. What's wrong with research and how to look at research, and like the observational studies. I mean, they're okay, but they're just okay. They're not great. But rat
Mhm.
studies too. Rat studies are like the second to lowest tier of research. But people are like, oh, but this rat study says this, or when they say this study said that, I'm like, I just want to see the study. Show me the study, and I'll probably be able to point out what's wrong with it. Oh, the group was too small. It was 11 people versus 120, or
Right.
I mean, there's a plethora of things that can go wrong with research. And so I'm always kind of encouraging people that to always keep your common sense about you. From a common sense perspective, monster drinks can't possibly be good for you. You don't need a study to tell you it's a neurotoxin. It's probably not good for you. Nothing is that color in nature.
Right?
Or maybe there is, but it's to warn off some other animal or flowers, right? So yeah, if people just sort of kept their common sense about them, mostly we just, we go to the grocery store and we're unconscious. We just go through the aisles. We don't. At least you look at labels. Good for you. Like you took a bunch of time to learn different terms and look at labels. And I'm just telling people like, the only reason could go so far as to say anti-vegan is because most people who are vegetarian or vegan do it poorly. They eat high
Mhm.
carb, they don't take supplements, they take them only like sporadically, they get really deficient, and then I can always see it on a blood test. They don't do well, and then they're not realizing it's because they're malnourished.
In your year-long
Just,
program, do you teach people how to do labs?
the final one actually is the final module 24 is on labs. So we talk about the what we do with a blood test is what we taught in that, and we as we go through the lecture we do the whole year long we mention, oh, like here's the functional medicine range for a C-reactive protein, things like that. But yes, on a test, when somebody sends me a test, because I do Skype calls and I do long distance stuff, so people will send me information. And what my staff does is we apply narrower ranges to the blood values so I can see, are you in an optimal health range rather than waiting for you to fall outside of lab ranges and then dealing with it.
Right.
So that's why I can see blood sugar issues years before it shows up and before a doctor will say something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm trying to get to stuff, catch the thyroid problems beforehand, running a bigger thyroid panel than just TSH, like all these different things. So our whole full panel is actually really the most extensive panel that people have probably ever seen. Is homocysteine and vitamin D and C-reactive protein and a bunch of markers on there that show me nutritional deficiencies as well. And so in that module, the lectures on that are looking at like what are the markers for that? Like alkaline phosphatase is just a number that you've probably never paid attention to in a blood test, but when it's low outside of our functional medicine ranges, not outside of the lab range, but outside of our ranges, it shows a zinc deficiency. Or when
Mm.
that a lot, or because you need zinc to make that enzyme go, or the other, like the liver enzymes, like when I see them low outside of our ranges, then it's often a B6 deficiency. So I can see these things on a standard test, which makes it, gives me a lot more indications for people of catching things before they're problematic.
Mm-hmm. And when someone takes your year-long program afterwards, are they a functional medicine practitioner or what's their title?
um they're like, well, that's a good question. I don't know what it is because we got hired to do that course. So, but it is a kind of just like a clinical nutritionist program. For the average person, it will be both fascinating and could have a lot of information to it. But that was one of the reasons that we were glad it was in video, because then you could rewind it and play it again. Because we do say an awful lot. Like my whole explanation about blood sugar, which I have on YouTube, which is also on our website. I did in a more expanded version. That was a whole module as well. So we just put in every single thing that we talk about, we've learned, in an effort to educate healthcare providers and like avid people who are like, you know, not professional but want to know a whole lot more. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's really up their alley.
Well, it's definitely up mine. I'm excited to learn more from you. I'd love to have you back on the show. I feel like we've just sort of this has just been the introduction, really. I feel like we
Yes,
could
we
spend
just
the
have all
next
kinds of stuff to talk about.
okay, and now the show begins. Okay, let's start, in the next 2 hours. Um, so we definitely want to have you back because I feel like we have so much that we could dive into. To circle back and complete the thought, when someone consumes sugar and you've gone into the sugar takes many forms. It could be processed, it could be in fruit, but it could be, sort of processed fruit like juice, or it could just
Or
be like eating
white bread,
a bunch of
you know.
rice, eating a bunch of
Yeah.
oatmeal. So all these different forms of sugar, um, if we eat too much of it for our body, which most people do and they don't know, what does it do to the body? How does it put the tax or put that stress on the body that lowers our nutrient levels?
Well, you need a whole bunch of B vitamins to metabolize carbohydrates. And so, some people will say, not incorrectly, that something like oatmeal is different. And uh, and if people have been listening since the beginning, they'll probably want to point out, well, how come traditional cultures could eat oatmeal and they didn't get diabetes? Like because, I would point out then also, how come the Japanese could eat rice and they did fine? It's like because those cultures didn't also eat sugar. When you
Mhm.
eat sugar to the degree that we actually eat sugar and drink sodas, then then perfectly okay things have to come off the table. If you never had sugar, you could be like the Scottish and eat oatmeal your whole life. If like the Irish, eat potatoes, right? You see what I'm saying? Like, if we, every single person who's listening to this, I would argue is broken already. I mean, I am too. I did carbo loading. I totally get it. So I just manage my carb intake. And so carbs then they do all break down to sugar. Some will break down faster. The whole grains break down slower, but that still doesn't make them not a carb. They're still a carb. And the main problem is it causes an insulin reaction. And as you go farther and farther into the spectrum of diabetes, it causes more of an insulin reaction until at some point, in an effort to kind of manage the overload of carbs, and then at some point when your pancreas gets tired of pumping all that insulin out and starts to fail, that's the diagnosis of diabetes. But the main thing that's problematic with insulin that I'm pretty sure your audience has not heard is insulin. You cannot burn fat when you have insulin in your system. Insulin is a storage hormone. If you eat carbs and that puts insulin in your system, and for a lot of people that causes extra insulin in your system, which means the insulin sits there in your bloodstream for it could be hours, that whole time you cannot burn fat. So even if you're eating whole grains, if your system is eating a lot, like it's trained for carbs, and you have a higher insulin reaction, and you would know this on a if you did a blood test and it said what the fasting insulin number was. So I could see that on a test. So if somebody has a higher number than 6, they probably have a higher, reaction, which means the insulin stays in their system longer, and that whole time they can't burn fat.
Fascinating.
Not to mention that insulin is considered the most inflammatory biomolecule there is. So if you wanted to manage inflammation, by far, managing insulin is the number one thing. I mean, I could go on. I wrote a book about hypertension too. Everybody goes on about salt, but there was a researcher who titled his research paper "The Wrong White Crystals" about how we demonize salt when actually it's sugar that's problematic because insulin causes fluid retention. So the very
Mm.
first thing I do when I work with people with hypertension is I have to get their carbs under control because insulin, I have people all the time, they lower their insulin reaction and then immediately they lose like, I had a patient, she lost 10 pounds in a week and her friends were like, well, that's just water weight. And I'm like, yeah, what are you doing walking around with 10 pounds of water?
When I went gluten free, I lost 25 pounds of water.
Wow.
And it was insane. My husband did too. I mean, I don't know if it was 25 pounds, but he we went gluten free. So we eliminated barley, wheat, rye, and oats because oats have
Yep.
gliadin in it. So it's just like forget it. Everyone tries to argue for their gluten free oats. Just forget it. Barley, wheat, rye, and oats out the door. And we did not go out and buy every gluten free bread out there. It's just potato flour and tapioca flour. It's like just as bad for for blood sugar, obviously. And they're
Hmm.
delicious and they're a wonderful treat when you're like, "I miss my bagels," or whatever. Like that once in a blue moon, go have some fun, but like we go have a gluten-free pizza once in a while and it's like a big treat. And then I definitely notice I'm not my 100% for a few days after eating something like incredibly high carb. I'm just a little groggy. Like I'm just my body's like meh. It's
Yeah.
not functioning optimally. I definitely don't have like these the sort of the blood sugar ups and downs and swings like I used to when I was diabetic. But I just noticed that I feel so good when I stay away from processed flour of any kind, whether it's gluten free or not.
Hmm.
And so yeah, we went barley wheat rye and oat free. And 1 month later, our wedding rings were flying off our fingers. Like it was scary because we don't want to lose them.
Hmm.
And so we waited a few more months. We like put elastic bands around our fingers and scotch tape and whatever to try to keep them on. And I didn't want to go and get our rings resized right away because like what if it just all bounces back? That would also be bad.
Uh-huh.
Um and so we waited a few more months and all that weight stayed off and our rings kept flying off. And so we went and had them resized. This was 7 years ago. I went down 1.5 ring sizes and my husband went
Whoa.
down 2 ring sizes. And this wasn't from weight loss. This was from water loss from cutting out the sugar and the gluten, which is, inevitably, I mean, cutting out all the grains that we had been consuming. Now we were still doing rice once in a while. Like we weren't like,
Yeah, I do
perfect,
rice once in a while too.
but yeah, that's what happened, and we could not. I mean, it was just mind blowing how much water weight. We got our driver's license photos taken right before we did this health change, and so if you look at our driver's license photos, we're like round.
Yeah.
And so we play
Yeah.
this game now. We call it gluten face, but we can look at people and you could just tell like the puffiness, like they don't have cheekbones, they're just kind of round. And not they don't have to be overweight, but there's amount like you can actually see the water that being
Yeah, and I
stored
don't
in them.
I don't know that's always gluten because, insulin can come from a reaction can come from
Oh
any carb.
sure. Oh
But yeah,
sure.
absolutely. You can see this on people and I'm not saying everybody has to be gluten free. Some people, think everybody should be this or that, and I'm not saying that. My husband's gluten free. We are in a gluten free house, but I'm not intolerant to gluten. But I think that with So gluten's not GMO in this country. People are quick to say that it is genetically engineered. It's not. There is a GMO wheat. It's just not used for food. But wheat is sprayed with Roundup now because it desiccates the wheat before harvest, and they'll
Yeah.
also spray it because it prevents problems in storage. And so that when I see people who are having reactions, I don't know if it's the gluten, and I don't know if it's the
Right.
Roundup, right?
Yes.
So I just really think that people probably should be eating gluten light, is how I describe it. If you're not actually gluten intolerant, it should be gluten light. So I eat really gluten light. I'm gluten free right now, but yeah, I think it's just, when people are like, oh, but we've been eating bread since biblical times. I'm like, not this, we haven't. And this is again where we had this narrow slice of time and we think it's always been like this, and it has not.
Have we been eating grains forever? Because there's this idea that we've only been eating them for between 10 and 14,000 years, and before that, forever many millions of years we've been here, who knows, that
Yeah,
we were not
yeah.
eating grains.
Yeah, that's not an idea. That's like a known archaeological thing. I mean, I had a woman who sat in one of my lectures who had a PhD in um, anthropology, and she said, "Yeah, absolutely. I don't know why we call them hunters and gatherers. It's really gatherers and hunters, but the gathering and hunting happened before we started settling down. Before that, we were migrating around, and we didn't settle in some place and grow things. And when we started to grow things and started farming, that changed. It changed even our genetics. So cultures that had cows. So this is like, let's say, Northern Europe.
Hmm.
Your genes change. It takes 10,000 years to change a gene. And so what the gene that changed was the gene that allowed you to break down the sugar in milk lactose,
So we're like,
right?
for 10,000 years, we're Northern Europeans drinking dairy, and they were lactose intolerant, and they were getting bloated and gassy and having pain for 10,000 years
No,
before they were able to handle it.
no, probably what happened is what happens typically in genetics is like the ones that could digest it when they reproduced, they would, have children that could, not always, but I would guess some of them could digest it. And at some point, you have more people who can digest it than don't. But this is
Hmm.
always dependent on did the culture where they're coming from have dairy available. This is why Asians don't tend to digest dairy well because genetically they don't have that gene.
Hmm.
Or not all cultures in Africa, but a bunch of them don't digest dairy well, also for the same reasons. So it just depends on what your, heritage is.
Hmm.
That's why
Absolutely.
genetics is really interesting. Genetics is not the answer to everything, but it is kind of a fascinating thing to understand genetics and then the epigenetic impact of different things. And, I can go on.
Oh, well, and you will, because we will have you back on the show. Can you give
Okay.
us an example of, like, and let's just say you're talking to a spectrum of people. So people who are eating super healthy now, we've got people who are keto, we've got people who are vegan. I mean, we're all over the board, right? And we've got some people who still eat the standard American diet, and they're just dipping their toe in the water and they're learning stuff. Could you lay out sort of like a breakfast, lunch, dinner? Give us a day of what you'd ideally love to see the entire population eat.
So let's see. I would love to see if it's possible for people to not have sugar every day. Most of my patients who come in, and I have a population of patients who I would argue are kind of on the higher spectrum of awareness of food. Otherwise, they wouldn't come in and talk to me. A lot of them have sugar every day. It would be super interesting for your audience to see, like, do I have sugar every day, and where do I have it? Like, it's because some people won't even count the sugar that's in their coffee. Like they have sugar in some form every day. And I'm not saying like what's in spaghetti sauce. I'm talking like they have a cookie at work or they have a little like mint at the restaurant. Like they have sugar in some form every day. Is one thing to look at. Another thing I'd say to look at is um, where is it possible to put vegetables? And so the example I give is we're supposed to be eating between 5 and 7 servings of vegetables, and most people do not get five. The autoimmune protocols that we look at has people doing 9 to 13. So so if we start, let's just take the average person has for breakfast. So let's say they have a couple of eggs and a couple of pieces of bacon. Okay. So no vegetables there. And then they go to lunch and let's say they have a sandwich and maybe it has a piece of lettuce on it and a tomato. It's like, okay, not exactly a vegetable, right? And so, for a snack in the afternoon, they're having like a granola bar, so no vegetables there. So to catch up to 5 servings of vegetables, they have to do that at dinner. Now, what my husband describes is we can't digest rocks. So we have the plants do it for us, and then we eat the plants. So if you want to get good mineral content, you got to eat enough vegetables, and mostly we don't, which means you have to start at breakfast. So you might start first with like, okay, let's say you have some scrambled eggs, like why don't you put that on a bed of lettuce, or stir the lettuce in there, or put some onion in there, or put some pico de gallo over it, or salsa even. Like all of that would be a good start. At lunch, let's say you have a, um, I mean, like I have make a quinoa salad that's got like I pack even leftover vegetables into that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, or let's say you have, chicken salad, you put it again, like I mentioned earlier, on a bowl of some leafy whatever, I don't care what it is, put it in there like that. Like, so now you've had a couple of cups of some leafy thing. Let's say you eat the chicken salad or whatever you're eating it with some, I don't know, cut vegetables. For a snack, I'll have like hummus and vegetables. I just made this super good vegan artichoke spinach dip for my book club last night, and it used cashew cheese. Cashews made into a cashew cheese for it, and it was really great. And I'm looking at that and like, okay, I stuffed in like almost a pound of spinach and a bunch of artichoke hearts into that, right? So, and then you eat it with vegetables. So it's like, oh, look at all those vegetables you ate in that thing, right?
Nice.
Right? Yeah. So it's kind of like that. Where can you put vegetables in during your day where it would be easy, right? Mostly we're just not paying attention and we're not making the effort. Or for example, I'll use if I have a protein shake in the morning, my protein shake has a bunch of vegetables already in the powdered part of it, right? So then I add then like a scoop of some super green powder. I might add some more other powdered vegetables I put in there, but it has some chai flavor in it, so it tastes overall great. I add some MCT oil, so it kind of stays with me a little bit more. I add collagen powder because collagen has a different amino acid profile than any other protein powder. It's high in glycine, and that particular amino acid is what's necessary to make repairs in your body. Anything to do with collagen and glycine is necessary for detoxification too. And lots of people are more glycine deficient than they think. So anyway, so that's collagen powder. So I add that in. So I just max out whatever I can put in there, zap it with a blender, like a
Mm-hmm.
little hand blender, and then that's like except for the collagen, it's a vegan shake in the morning, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it has
Nice.
a bunch of vegetables in it, right? So this is the thing when I said that American vegetarians, and that would include vegans, are known for not eating enough vegetables.
Yep. They're junketarians.
Yes, I had no idea, but I heard Cheetos are vegan. Right? And so this is what I mean. This is my biggest complaint. It's like if you're eating something in a way that will already cause deficiency if you were doing it in a perfect way, and then you do it in an imperfect way, it's like you only cause yourself harm. Like
Mm,
we don't have time for that because then it makes you susceptible to diseases.
mm-hmm. You're reminding me of this great recipe I have on my website. It's a soup, but it's so meaty, it's so rich that men who don't like vegetables will drink it. My husband had chronic, and he gave me permission to say this, but he had chronic constipation his whole life. He would go bathroom like between 1 and 3 times a week. And that's it. And so this naturopath told us, okay, well, why don't you make a bone broth soup as a
Yep.
base, and then cabbage, and because cabbage is really healing for the gut. And she goes, oh, and throw in some other vegetables too. Like I knew beets were healthy for the liver, and so I went nuts, and I made a big, giant thing of bone broth, like grass fed bones and all that, and and then I added cabbage, beets, celery heart,
Probably onion,
yeah,
garlic, all that
all
stuff.
the bay
Celery, yep.
leaves, that whole thing.
Carrots, yeah.
And it was full. I mean, it was just full. And then I simmer it for like 30 minutes, and then I took a hand immersion blender. And oh, and right at the end I turn off the stove, and then I would add, this is back when my husband ate meat. I would add a like 2 pounds of lamb, like ground lamb, with
Yep.
some, sage and all that, or or beef. But usually lamb because it just had this wonderful flavor. And then I would add like 2 bushels, 1 or 2 bushels of cilantro. And so the heat's off, but it's still, really hot. And then I'd immersion blend it. and till it's like this wonderful, like smooth, but little tiny bit of chunky. But it was just chock full carrots, everything I could think of. And then what I'd usually do is throw in all the leftover vegetables I had. So like
Uh-huh.
broccoli, it just whatever was in the fridge, I'd throw that in it too and blend it. And he drank one whole bowl was so filling. He had one bowl for one meal a day. So it was usually like lunch or dinner. And he did that one bowl for a week, and that was almost 4 years ago. And that cured his constipation. He has never had
Hmm.
constipation since. He's been regular, like 3 times a day, kind of regular. Um, and it was just amazing how it's like, wow, if you actually like get in, and that wasn't even in like to your standards, to my standards, that wasn't enough vegetables a day, but that was like more vegetables
A
than he ever had in his
huge
life.
thing. Yeah.
And so it can be fun to sneak in vegetables. You can make it really delicious to sneak in vegetables. He constantly complains because I feed him vegetables all the time. And he's like, I don't want to chew it. It's just too much chewing. And so that's where you get out the blender, right? It's like, I'm just gonna make you a smoothie. Fine, I'll just throw the vegetables in that, or I'll make you a soup.
Yeah,
But
that's really good.
yeah, but you
Th-
can make a meaty, like make those if you have a man at home that's like just clearly does not like vegetables and loves meat, then you can make these really, vegetable rich, meaty, um soups or stews and sneak in a lot of vegetables into them.
Well, soup stock is actually one of the most healing things for the gut. We actually use bone broth, like a teaspoon of it, for babies or small children who
Oh,
have colic or constipation. It's like 100% effective. We've never had a case that didn't respond.
amazing.
Yeah, it's enormously. It's, in fact, when people have a leaky gut, it's actually the main thing I tell them is you have to do that. There's nothing. We have no pill. Nothing as effective is as effective as bone broth for gut inflammation.
That is so exciting. Now, what about those bone broths you can buy like in powder form? Do you think they're as effective, or do you think it's
They're
effective to
they're
make it
actually
yourself?
okay.
Are
They're
they?
actually yeah, they are actually okay. And I say this because downstairs I've got some bone broth in a jar, but but it's again kind of a good, better, best thing. It's like if you make stuff at home and it gels super well and you get really high quality stuff, like that's great, and not everybody can do that. Sometimes people just make it and it doesn't, it's still good. But if you're not going to make it, then you should buy it. And the bought stuff tastes really good too. So, however, I don't care how people do it.
Love it. Very interesting. My son was colicky and it was just like,
Mm.
I wish I'd known that back then, but homeopathy was the only thing that we found worked for us. But again, I didn't try bone broth, so I didn't know, but now I do.
Oh yeah.
But homeopathy worked wonders. So thank goodness we found something that gave us relief. But
Yeah,
that's really good to know for all the listeners that have gut issues, that they should start drinking bone broth to see a
totally.
difference.
Yeah, I would
That's
stay
great.
away from soy. Soy is super hard to digest. Bone broth is really helpful. If people have symptoms, sometimes it's a deficiency. They're deficient in enzymes, or they're deficient in bile salts for their gallbladders. So they can't break down fat, so they burp a lot. Or they're deficient in stomach acid. Their stomach has gotten stressed at some point and they can't break down their food properly. This is when people come to me and like, oh, I don't digest red meat well, so I'm not eating red meat. I'm like, or they've taken out a bunch of foods. Red meat's just classic because it's one of the hardest things to digest because it has a lot of collagen in it. And then people will say, oh, I don't eat that. And I'm like, okay, so I just want you to consider you should actually be able to digest that. So if you can't, or you're avoiding certain foods, you might look over here with you and not look at the food. It's over here. Maybe you've got some deficiencies to prevent you from breaking that food down.
Oh,
I I
fascinating.
I had a 20-year-old who came in with her mom just last week, and she's like, I'm thinking she's vegetarian because sometimes people will do that at that age, but it's not that actually. She's avoiding meat because she can't digest it. And so when we started supplementing some of these areas I was just mentioning, she immediately noticed burping's better, digestion, less gas, everything starts to get better.
Very cool. That's really exciting. Um, can you share with us some of the examples of dinner? Like what do you and your husband eat for dinner?
So I 2 nights a week we order from one of those mail order food places. We use Sunbasket because Sunbasket has like paleo meals and low carb meals, and so we tend to do that. And then other meals are always going to be vegetable heavy, some form of protein, and that could be, I don't know, anything. Since we are proponents of people eating a bit more fat, we always buy, if we're going to get chicken, we don't get boneless, skinless chicken breast. Our chicken's always bone in, skin on. When we eat some meat. My husband's just more active, and I don't eat quite as much as he does. He does better with, or he can digest more protein, more fat than I can. I do a little bit less than that. But it's always some vegetable thingy in some version, let's see. For book club last night, I made a stir fry with about five different vegetables in it, including shiitake mushrooms with some beef, and then I had this vegan because I have a bunch of people off of gluten, dairy, and eggs. So I made this vegan dip with artichoke and spinach, cashew nut cheese thing. Uh, that was good. And then I made a really good dessert with coconut milk, an avocado, a banana, a bunch of tablespoons of chocolate powder, a little bit of xylitol, and a little bit of like vanilla flavored stevia, all mashed up in my food processor. It takes like five. The hardest thing is opening the damn cans of the coconut milk, but the rest of it's easy. And you throw all that in there, and then you stick it in the fridge, and it's like not coconut. It's like chocolate banana mousse. It's super
Wow.
lightweight, yeah, and it takes nothing to make it. And it's, everything free and not, and that's the thing because a lot of stuff can be gluten free or dairy free, but then it still has sugar in it. So I
Yep.
find as time has kind of marched on that I just am more responsible with trying to make things and I'm trying to get faster at making things at home.
What are the I know it's going to be a range because everyone's different. Like you said, your husband eats more than you because of his activity level. But do you have sort of a maximum amount of net carbs you'd want people to
Yep, and the
meet?
first thing is it's not net carbs. Net carbs are like a made up thing. That's like carbs with fiber. I mean, even not that I'm saying WebMD is a really good reference for this, but even WebMD says that. And the reason I say that is because if you get something that has 25 grams of carbs and they have a bunch more fiber in it, so they're like, oh, it's only 5 grams of carbs, net carbs. It's like, okay, they didn't just magically make 20 grams go away. Those carbs still cause an insulin reaction. They just slow down the amount of glucose going into the system. That's what the fiber does. It slows down the amount of glucose so it doesn't go in as fast. But it all goes in. And if you're somebody whose system is trained for insulin, you're still going to have your insulin reaction or overreaction. So I have a whole handout on this. I wrote about this in my book too, right? It's like the book, in case you want to know the book, it's Smart Blood Sugar. And that's the website, smartbloodsugar.com. So I go through all of this in there because, there's a lot of questions people have about carbs. And that's a really good one because if we had net carbs, we could eat a lot more. But net carbs don't work for most people. So what I tell people is 60 grams of carbs, not including vegetables, because as I said earlier, nobody got diabetes from carrots. So, but it's things that I've mentioned, breads and chips and crackers and fruit and beans and beer and potatoes, including sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes are not, I mean, what's the first word there? Sweet and potatoes. Okay. So, so, and things that have carbs, right? Mostly those things. And so, avocados, I point out to people, avocado's not on the list, so I don't care about avocado. Eat all avocado you want. Meat's not on the list. Dairy, milk is on the list because milk has a sugar called lactose. So, I had a patient who came in who is, we're currently struggling with him because he drinks, I'm not kidding you, 3 gallons of milk a day because his digestion, his stomach hurts so much.
Yeah.
But it gave him diabetes.
Yeah.
And his blood sugar's like 500. We sent him to the emergency room because it's just a huge amount of sugar. And that's the danger to skim milk. Is fat balanced out the sugar content in milk. So any milk that's been modified, 2%, even the whole milk, just so you know, that 3 1/4, that's not how it came out of the cow. It comes out of the cow at so depending on the time of year, between 6 and 11%. So that's the whole milk is 3 1/4, and 2% is really not that much different from that. But when you take the fat out, what you're left with is a sugar water, which is why the studies show that if you feed babies and toddlers and small children skim milk or 2% milk, they have a much higher chance of being obese 5 years later.
Oh,
Yep.
so sad.
Yeah, because we modified the food again. It's a processed food.
So you're saying 60 grams of carbs would include Uh,
It's not,
beans.
yes, it does include that. It does include any green vegetables or beets or carrots. So all I'm telling people is like leaving, don't, so if, let's say you're doing a food log. I don't, if you eat, let's say, a salad and it's got chicken on it and you had avocado in it and, none of that is on my list. Now, if you had a baked potato, that's on the list. If you had any bready thing, anything, all that, you count the carbs on that. So 60, just to give you some context, a banana is 29. A piece of bread, depending on the size, and I don't care if it's whole grain or not, bread is bread, is usually about 20. It might vary depending on the type or the size of the slice. A medium-sized mocha from Starbucks is like 42. Their
Oh,
frappuccinos are over 60. Like it doesn't take much to get to 60. So let's say you take somebody who, like when somebody comes in, like, I'm a healthy eater. It's like, okay, so they take oatmeal and they add some dried fruit to that and like raisins. Let's say they put some raisins in there. And let's say they add a little bit of like brown sugar, just a little bit. And then they add a little bit of milk to that. It's like, okay, so that puts you're probably at, oh, and a serving size of oatmeal, just so you know, is a quarter of a cup. So most people don't do that. Right? So that if you serve yourself a normal serving size, it'll be over 60, and you haven't even left the house yet.
and you definitely cut up a banana and put that in there too.
Yeah, totally, right? So this is the challenge. If somebody is carb intolerant, which is the term they use in research, it's like they're carb intolerant. I don't care if it's a good carb or bad carb. It's still they are intolerant.
And let's say they went super heavy on vegetables, so they, because someone could eat 70 grams of carbs from vegetables, right? From green
Yeah.
vegetables. Um, does that, I mean, a carb's a carb, but does that act differently in the body because it was, like 10 cups of broccoli?
Well, normally people won't eat 10 cups of broccoli. It does actually slow you down at some point, right? But I mean, this you can see traditionally people didn't get diabetes from vegetables, and when people say diabetes is genetic, I'm like, remember, 10,000 years to change a gene. Okay, so it'd be quite reasonable to look 100 years ago or 200 years ago. It's like, well, we didn't have the diabetes epidemic that we have now, so there could be in certain populations maybe a cluster of genes that I phrase it like this, like that gives you diabetes maybe 5 seconds faster than the next person, but you still have to be exposed to an overload of carbs and one could argue bad food. Because I saw a study where you got diabetes just from eating too much white rice,
Mm,
right? So it doesn't just have to be, sugar. But that's just what we're mostly seeing. Is mostly it's just a high sugar or refined flour, which breaks down to sugar within an hour.
mhm.
So that's the whole thing is like most people, by the time they see me, and by most, I mean 99.9%, they are carb intolerant. So the 60 grams, not including vegetables, does translate into typically like 90 or 100 grams of carbs. It's just if I say that, then people eat that in bread,
Yeah.
right? So I have to say
Right.
60, and I didn't make up the number of 60. The researcher Wolfgang Lutz wrote a book called Life Without Bread, and he saw that if you wanted to not end up diabetic at the end of your life, you would have to average about 72 grams of carbs a day. And most people that I see still have trouble with that. They still gain weight or they still have blood sugar issues. So 60 seems to be a number that works for most people. Some people, once you get kind of used to it, they'll often do less than that. But a ketogenic diet is like 20 grams of carbs, including vegetables.
Mhm.
So it's not ketogenic by any means, but it's, low enough carbs that people absolutely notice the difference. I used to call the smart blood sugar, the package I had in my office for that, the 7-day challenge, because I could guarantee if people ate like that within a week, they would notice the difference. That woman who lost the 10 pounds of water, yeah, she was our very first patient who did it, actually. I remember her. And she lost 10 pounds in a week of water.
That's so it's so exciting that something that is everyone listening could do this today. Everyone listening could go home, just remove everything with sugar and focus on massive amounts of vegetables, responsible amount of fruit, really
But here's the thing, it's hard to do that. So that's why sometimes you could do that if you took out everything that has sugar in it. But what if we just took out, like, what if we didn't worry about the ketchup? Like I don't really care that much about the ketchup. It's like, okay, so let's look at the really obvious things. right? Like the bread, like how much bread people eat, or the
Hmm.
things that they're drinking. Like if we just manage that, then what's in ketchup doesn't really make a difference. It's like, and it's not like you're never going to have sugar again. I tell people, absolutely, I will have sugar, but I tell you right now, I will not waste my time on supermarket cake because there's a variety of things that are wrong with that, not to mention the amount of sugar in it, but like that buttercream frosting is not made from butter. Okay, that's made from a hydrogenated fat, and hydrogenated fats do damage in your system for 90 days. So
Wow.
when I learned that, I was like, okay, enough of that. But if I go to a birthday party and they got a cake like it's homemade or it's from a really good bakery, yeah, totally, I'll have a piece of that. But the thing is, I showed up at that party. I didn't have a lot of carbs that day. I didn't have a lot yesterday. I'm not going to have a lot tomorrow. Right? Like I just consistently have managed my carb intake now for probably close to 15 years because I
Hmm.
just see that because my life works when I do that. And if I don't, then it doesn't.
And saying, that someone's eating 100 carbs a day, grams of carbs a day isn't like quote unquote low carb. It sounds more like just responsible balanced carbs because you're saying, you're going to get, 60 is for all the frivolous stuff that's not vegetables, and then I want you eating lots of vegetables. And so you're
Uh-huh.
probably going to get more than 100 grams. That seems very balanced and doable. It's just there's a period of adjustment for
There
almost
is.
everyone.
There is. That's why I don't, say rip everything out of your. I don't even say no sugar. I'm like, if you want to have cookies, but you're gonna have to look up what a serving size of cookies is and how many grams of carbs that is. If you want sweet potatoes, sure, but I think a serving size of sweet potatoes, make sure you're getting an actual serving size. But I think the serving size is like 44 grams of carbs. So it's like I'm not saying you can't have those things, and everybody's got some deal breaker. I had a guy who came in, and his thing was Belgian beer. He totally wanted Belgian beer. I'm like, okay, Mike, you totally get to have Belgian beer. But the thing is, you can't eat crap all day and then go home and have Belgian beer. So he got himself all straightened out. Like he saved his, carb points, is how he put it, for a Belgian beer at the end of the day. And I had a German woman, and her thing was like black bread with cheese. Like, okay, so great, then just rearrange everything else so that that's the thing that you want to have.
We're so
You see what I'm saying?
funny.
It's like, yeah, yeah, we are funny. We all have our little thing, and it's we just we waste a lot of our insulin reaction and carb points, however you want to phrase that, on crappy stuff that we don't like. We just don't even pay attention when we're eating it, so it's just not worth it. So it's like I'm just like, if you're going to eat something, like pay attention, make it worthwhile. Just
Mhm.
don't do that every day.
Yeah.
Right? Like if
Yeah.
you could easily use xylitol in your coffee or stevia in your coffee, well, great. You just save the sugar in your coffee. You can use that carb point put someplace else, right?
Right. I used to put agave. Oh my gosh, I
I
used to put
know.
agave in my coffee because I thought it was healthier.
Oh,
And then when I
people.
learned all about fructose, oh my gosh.
Well, people wanted some miracle sweetener. And
Yeah.
it says on the label low glycemic, and they don't realize that glycemic only refers to the glucose content, of which it's only 10%. The fructose content is 90%, and that's the thing that does the most damage.
Right. Yeah, it it
I
it
mean,
it
it's
it
a
it kind of is like crack for the brain though because that doesn't trigger the satiety mechanism, and you can just like the example is like someone could chug 2 liters of Coke because there's like a ton of fructose in it, but sit down and chug 2 liters of milk. I mean, most people that would just couldn't imagine doing that. They could imagine drinking 2 liters of Coke. They couldn't imagine drinking 2 liters of milk.
Well,
And
it's different. Yeah,
yeah.
but the biochemistry really counts though. It's like so like we'll, for example, demonize high fructose corn syrup, but we don't actually know the biochemistry of that. But the sugar molecule in there is a 55-45 mix, 55% fructose, 45% glucose. White sugar is a 50-50 mix. It's not much different. Do you see? So like we'll demonize high fructose corn syrup and not demonize sugar. And they'll go like, "Oh, I'm only buying organic cane sugar sodas from Whole Foods." I'm like, "You have no idea how bad sugar is for you, though, and you think high fructose corn syrup is doing all the damage? You have no idea." You see what I'm saying? Like people don't, and that's where the agave is like, "Oh, 90-10." It's like, huh, but we don't know, and the lactose from the milk, that's 50% glucose, and glucose comes with that insulin reaction,
Mhm.
right? That's why milk can be, if you do a lot of it, can be. It's why it's on my list of things you have to count because of that. So if you're going to have lattes, it's like, yeah, got to count that.
Now you've mentioned xylitol, so that's an alcohol sugar, and you've mentioned stevia. Do you have like a list of sort of like safe sugar? Say, are these the safe
Yeah,
sugars?
so sugar alcohol, so that's xylitol, sorbitol, and erythritol. Erythritol is like Truvia mixed in with Truvia and stevia. Sugar alcohols are not um, sugar nor alcohol in the way that we think about them in real life. It's a biochemical designation by the groups that are attached to it. So just kind of put that it's not alcoholic. It's a sugar alcohol, and it doesn't cause an insulin reaction in the same way. Xylitol is helpful. It's actually a prebiotic, but all of them, if you do too much of them, will can cause diarrhea. So don't go crazy there. That's why I use a mix when I'm baking or, making a dessert. I'll use some xylitol and some like stevia. Now, the stevia, sometimes people have a complaint about the aftertaste, but that's where the liquid stevias can be helpful. They seem to have less. They can get flavored ones like vanilla, or if I have sparkling water, I might use a couple of drops of the orange and make like orange soda, something like that. It's really good for kids too. Monk fruit is also great. Lohan is also great. So I've seen those as sweeteners and things, and those don't cause an insulin reaction either. You can actually, I've seen those also in the grocery store, like little packs that you can carry around and add to your own coffee if you're out. So I find that those tend to be working. And one of my patients came in and she said she found something on Amazon called Just Like Sugar that was made out of chicory, which does seem to behave just like sugar. I've tried that too, but it tastes fine. Looks like sugar, acts like sugar. So I use xylitol in my tea in the morning. So
It's interesting. I mean, I looked into a little bit because I noticed that I did keto, like I was in ketosis for like 2 years, and
sure.
I noticed that alcohol sugars would kick me out of ketosis,
Mhm.
and my body just I'd get bloated. I would just feel really gross, like any amount of it. I don't think I can digest it. I think, and I read
Yeah,
somewhere that some people just cannot tolerate alcohol sugars.
yeah, it could very well be.
So we got to play around with it. I've got a favorite brand. I don't remember it right now, but I've actually I interviewed the I'm going to publish this interview later, but I haven't published it yet, but I interviewed a man who owns a stevia company out of Portland, Oregon, and it's my number one favorite of all the stevias I've ever tried. This one doesn't have any aftertaste, and I'm like
Wow.
perplexed. I know. I mean, and it's really amazing. Um, I'll put it in the show notes of the podcast so those who want to like try the stevia that I put in my coffee that I'm a raving fan of. And it's funny because it lasts so long. You use so little, it lasts so long that I think I've used it's one bottle a year. It is so concentrated, and it's just this, his company's amazing, and he actually he sells stuff like you can buy all kinds of the different sweeteners from him, but he also private labels for most of the companies out there, like different
Nice.
variants. And so he told me about he has an R&D lab where they're like experimenting making like sugar-free and by sugar-free I mean like with monk fruit and stevia and that kind of thing, and
Mhm.
and alcohol sugars, making these like keto-friendly syrups and keto-friendly
Oh, nice.
ice creams, and so they'll actually all like everyone in his office are all in ketosis with their little keto, testing
Yeah.
tips, and they'll eat the R&D lab people will like test their ketones, test their blood sugar, eat a bowl of this, like delicious ice cream with the syrup, and like it's all made with these sweeteners that don't trigger an insulin response, and then they'll test their ketones, and they have more ketones because it's just a bunch of fat that they just ate that was all like sweetened with monk fruit or whatever.
That was
And
great.
so it was like it's pretty, it's interesting what is going on, and so these things we're going to see in the market in a few, a year or two or three, are kind of happening in his R&D lab. And I mean, we have to, this is for a treat, like we wouldn't want to eat this every day, right? This is for a
Mhm.
treat, and we want to focus on vegetables being, the foundation of everything, right? And get all of our nutrition from a balanced diet, and with supplementation when needed. But if it was a difference between going to Baskin Robbins and going up have some of
Right.
this like stevia ice cream, like, sign me up
Yep.
for the stevia ice cream for that once in a while treat. I'd love to try it. So excellent. Well, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show. I really, really could have
Yeah.
you on for hours and hours. And I'd love to have you back. To wrap up today's interview, Do you have any parting advice that you'd like to give to the listeners?
Uh, I would watch. I mean, sugar really is problematic. So, like, I would really try to manage your carb and sugar intake. I think if you don't take supplements, you might look at doing that because overall we see that people live better if they have some supplementation. And supplementation needs time. It's like the best way to describe it is like low dose, long term. Like the best benefits come in years from now. And so I would start as soon as you can to make sure that you're supporting your, however good your food is. We probably always could use a bit more support. So I think about that too. And maybe you want to delve into your health a bit more. It's like, well, find a functional medicine practitioner who can, tell you a little bit more about your health because I see all the education we do with our patients and I realize people are hungry for knowledge. So critically
Hmm.
think. I want people to critically think. So question everything and like delve into it.
Nice. Now let's make sure that everyone knows about your website. So merrittwellness.com. They should definitely go to the lecture section and sign up for that free webinar. Where else should they go on your website?
I have a ton of articles that are free for people. Like when you talked about folic acid, I have a whole article about myths and facts about MTHFR. For example, I have an article on, what's the truth in salt research. I have a whole article, a written article about like what's wrong with research, called That Study is Wrong. I've got all sorts of articles up there. I published stuff for a whole bunch of years on like there's an article about meat and what's wrong with meat and what's okay with meat and like a whole bunch of different articles because what I'm really trying to do is break up myths in nutrition and like kind of this automaticity we have about this is good and this is bad and like actually looking at that and critically questioning what we think we know. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, that's what those articles are all about. I got lots of that.
Very cool. And if someone wanted to work with you, now you could work with people around the world over Skype.
Uh-huh. Absolutely. I have a guy in Singapore tomorrow who's talking to me on Skype.
Very cool. And how would someone go about working with you?
They could simply call my office, and my office will schedule them at that time. And we have an online portal to fill out paperwork, so they'll just set you up for that, and then you get to fill it out on your computer online, and then we have our conversation. I've read all your paperwork ahead of time, and if you have blood values or a test you want me to look at, you just send those too. And then we have a whole conversation about like what are you looking for, and how do we go about getting you the health you want.
And then do you send them away to go get labs? And can they do that no matter where they are around the world?
A lot of times we can get some labs, mostly in the United States. If you're outside of the United States, I'll probably have to use your labs, but then I'll often send a list of the tests I'm looking for so you can go back to your doctor and say, I want a little bit more of an expanded panel because, mostly doctors are running kind of a really minimal panel, and I want things like that are not all normally on there, like vitamin D and homocysteine and, things like that.
Very cool. Excellent. Anything else on your website that we should make sure we check out when we're there?
Oh, I've got some videos about blood sugar that have been bizarrely popular for, the topic. There's links to my books up there. I wrote a book about reversing diabetes, a book about reversing hypertension. My husband and I co-wrote a book about reversing insomnia and sleep issues. And then we also wrote a book. There's a whole element on our website about talking about cognitive decline. We're certified in the Bredesen protocol, which is a research neurologist who's been able to reverse Alzheimer's in patients. And so yeah, that's a whole other podcast for you. It's really mind-boggling. Yeah, no pun intended, but it's fascinating. And we have, a bunch of patients. We have one of the best programs in the country for that. And it's a year-long, program. But really, we're delving deeply into somebody's health and seeing what's caused that. He's been able to distinguish 6 different types of Alzheimer's. And so we run a lot of tests and he has a specialized computer program where we submit all of that and it pumps out a report that tells us what's the prevalence of what's happening with this person. So it could be, they have a, glycotoxic is one of those. I mean, insulin resistance and diabetes is called, Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes is the term they use now. But
Mm-hmm.
we see a lot of people who have like a mold exposure or a Lyme exposure or, but I mean, other things that cause cognitive decline is like B12 deficiency and hypothyroidism. So we look for all those different things. So it's a really in-depth thing. Anyway, that's a whole section on our website too. So I mean, our website's probably more in depth than people need. It's got a ton of stuff on there. So, you can just wander around. And then if you have questions, just send us an email or give us a call.
Oh, fascinating. Thank you so much for being on the show. This was
Boom.
a pleasure to have you here, and we definitely need to have you back. I can't wait to have you back. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for telling it like it is.
Thank you very much for having me. I loved it.
Are you looking to optimize your health? Are you looking to get the best supplements at the lowest price? For high quality supplements and to talk to someone about what supplements are best for you, go to takeyoursupplements.com, and one of our fantastic True Health coaches will help you pick out the right supplements for you that are the highest quality and the best price. That's takeyoursupplements.com. takeyoursupplements.com. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Be sure to ask about free shipping and our awesome referral program. Hello, True Health Seeker. I have a very exciting announcement. I have spent over a year, I've spent about 14 months collecting all of my information that I use with my clients for ending anxiety, and I created an online program. I'm very excited about it. We just launched it. And for you, for free, I have a webinar where I teach you 2 powerful mind tricks for removing anxiety, ending worry, and controlling fear so it stops controlling you and your life. In my free webinar, you will learn what causes anxiety and how to stop it, the science behind the mind-body connection, overcoming fear of public speaking, getting unstuck, ending that fear of things not working out, ending procrastination and overwhelm, and feeling excited, grounded, and calm instead of fear and worry. I have so much to teach you in my free webinar, and I'm really excited for you to come check it out. Go to freeyouranxiety.com/webinar. That's freeyouranxiety.com/webinar, or look in the show notes of today's podcast and you'll see the link there so you can jump into the webinar and learn all these wonderful, powerful tools that will end your anxiety and create excitement and happiness instead. Go to freeyouranxiety.com/webinar and sign up now, and I look forward to seeing you in the next live webinar.